We thought we were chasing peace. Something quiet, something ancient, something to help us get away from everything we'd been carrying back home. But what we found in the Appalachian Mountains, what found us, was not peace. It was older than peace. Wilder. Hungrier. We were 3 weeks into our trip when it started. Me, my brother David, and my wife Jen. We'd taken our Volkswagen Eurovan up from Asheville, chasing the cool air and green silence of the Blue Ridge. Jen and I had needed the break. We'd both been stretched thin at work, and David needed space. He'd lost someone. Still wasn't ready to talk about it. It's funny how silence can feel healing at first, until it doesn't. We'd been camping along the Appalachian backroads, picking out those little RV pull-offs that weren't even listed on the park maps, just known by word of mouth or vague GPS coordinates. The kind of places where you lose signal the moment you hit the dirt road in. We thought it was a good idea. Disconnect. Live simply. Breathe deeper. And for a while, it was. Until the spot we chose just past Klingman's Dome. It was barely a sight, more like a widened shoulder with a view of the deep forest valley below. No picnic table, no fire ring, just a sloped edge where the fog rolled over the ridge every evening like it had somewhere to be, fast. We pulled in around 5 p.m. The sun was already behind the trees and everything felt soaked in that rich, humming quiet you only find high up in the hills. I remember Jen stepping out and whispering, "It feels untouched." David was already pulling out the camp chairs, grunting agreement. He didn't say much anymore. Not since Marcy passed. I didn't push him. We set up like we always did. Got the van level, folded out the kitchenette, cracked a couple beers. Just as the last light was fading, we watched mist thread itself between the trees below, weaving through them like it knew every twist and root. That first night, nothing happened, but I couldn't sleep. There was something about the air. It had that coppery taste, like after a lightning strike or bleeding gums. Jen was already out cold, and David was snoring softly in the pop-top above. But I laid there staring at the ceiling, listening. The forest wasn't quiet. It was shifting. Now I've camped enough to know that forests talk. Owls, wind, rodents. But this was different. It wasn't just sounds. It was the way they came. Sudden, then far. Like something moving fast but staying out of sight. At one point, I swear I heard a voice. Not words, just the cadence of one. Low and broken, like someone trying to hum with a collapsed lung. I sat up, heart thudding, listening, but nothing else came. When the morning light hit, it was easy to shake off. We were in the wild, after all. Old woods, older stories. Maybe I'd let my nerves run with the silence. We made coffee and laughed it off. Even joked about it being a ghost deer. Jen snapped a picture of David making his classic unimpressed face and captioned it, "Sasquatch Whisperer." We moved on. But the next night, something followed us. We'd hiked out a bit during the day, just a short loop trail down to an old stone chimney, the kind you see when the rest of a cabin has long rotted away. Jen was snapping photos. David was poking at mushrooms with a stick. I walked a little ahead, clearing my head. That's when I found the circle. Not a perfect one, but clearly placed. Rocks stacked in a ring, moss peeled away beneath them. Inside, a half-burned length of rope, some blackened feathers. The bones of a small animal, maybe a rabbit, though the skull had been crushed. I called the others over. Jen stepped close, frowning. Probably just someone's weird nature ritual thing. David didn't say a word. He just turned and walked back the way we came. That night, the knock started. We'd returned to the van by dusk. Jen made pasta on the propane burner while I tuned the solar panel. David sat staring out at the woods, arms crossed. I tried to joke with him, tried to say, "Hey, at least it's not a Blair Witch setup, right?" But he didn't even smile. We climbed into the van after dark. It had dropped to about 40 degrees, mist rolled in thicker than ever, visibility dropped to almost nothing beyond the windows. It was like being inside a snow globe, only the flakes were made of fog and ash. Then, right as I started to drift off, there was a knock. Not a branch. Not an animal. A knock. 3 of them. Measured. Intentional. On the back of the van. I froze. So did Jen. Her hand slid into mine beneath the sleeping bag. We didn't say a word. We just listened. Nothing. Then again, knock, knock, knock. David rustled above us. What the hell was that? I whispered. Stay quiet. We waited. Minutes passed. I cracked the side curtain open. Fog. Just fog. But when I looked down, there were footprints. Bare feet in the mud, leading up to the van's back door. We should have left. We didn't. In the daylight, the tracks were still there, but only leading to the van. None leading away. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe some night hiker got lost. Maybe someone was playing a prank. But deep down, none of us believed that. You don't walk barefoot at 4,000 feet in the cold, not unless you're not really walking. David wanted to stay one more night. He didn't say why, just looked out at the woods like they owed him something. We stayed. That night, I didn't sleep. Neither did Jen. And around 1:30 in the morning, the fog came in thicker than I'd ever seen. It was suffocating. The van walls felt like they were sweating. Every window had condensation dripping like tears. Jen was shivering, whispering, "Something's out there." I held her close. "We're fine. We're locked in." Then we heard it again. Knock. This time on the side door. And right after it, a whisper, right next to the glass. Only one word. Hello. I didn't move. Jen was clutching my arm so hard her nails dug through the flannel sleeve, right down to the skin. I stared at the fog-beaded window where the voice had come from. Hello. That's all it said, but not in a pleading tone. Not frightened, not lost. It was expectant, like it knew someone was listening, like it had been waiting for that moment. For us. David shifted above and the pop-top creaked faintly. I held up a finger to Jen. Wait. Stillness. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure whoever was outside could hear it, like it was echoing through the whole metal shell of the van. Nothing moved for a long time. Then the voice came again. Louder. Closer. Come out. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even angry. It was inviting. I finally found my voice and called up, quiet and sharp. David, you hearing this? No answer. David, I hissed again, louder this time. A slow creak above us. Then, he's not here. My blood turned to ice. The voice didn't come from outside this time. It came from inside the van. Jen made a choking sound in her throat, scrambling to unzip the sleeping bag. I twisted, grabbing the flashlight from the mesh pocket beside the kitchenette. Clicked it on. Light sliced through the condensation-filled cabin like a blade. No one was there. David's bunk was empty, his sleeping bag unzipped, flattened, but no sign of the door opening. No footsteps, no wind, and no sound of anyone climbing down from the pop-top. I shoved the side door open. Fog poured in like smoke. "David!" I shouted into the trees. The beam of the flashlight was worthless. It hit a wall of white a few feet out and died. I stepped out barefoot onto the wet pine needles and gravel, yelling again, "David!" No reply. Jen was behind me now, pulling on boots, face pale, eyes wide and wild. Then, from somewhere to the left, down the slope, came a laugh. Too broken, too slow, like someone imitating human joy without understanding what laughter really was. I aimed the flashlight toward it, but it only caught outlines of twisted brush and mist curling in thick tendrils. "Stay here," I told Jen, though my voice was shaking worse than my hands. She grabbed my arm. "You're not going out there." "I have to. He could be hurt. He's gone." I didn't want to believe her, but she was right. There were no footsteps, no trail, no sound of someone crashing through brush or calling back, just the fog. And that wrong voice. Still, I took 3 steps into the trees. That's when I saw the figure, barely visible, standing maybe 30 feet away. Back turned to me, shoulders sloped. Not quite right in shape, arms too long or hanging wrong, still, too still. "David?" I called stupidly. It moved, but it didn't turn. It twitched, like a puppet trying to come to life. One leg lifted in a jerky, spasmed motion and then dropped again. The arms didn't swing, the head didn't shift, but the thing began to walk haltingly, deeper into the fog. I followed, for maybe 10 feet. Then the flashlight caught something else at my feet. A shirt. David's shirt, torn at the collar. One sleeve ripped off completely, still warm. I backed up fast, nearly tripped over a root. Jen called for me again, more frantic this time. I turned and ran back to the van. We slammed the door and locked every latch. I shut off the lights, killed the flashlight. We sat in the dark, listening, waiting, breathing too loud, hearts thudding like war drums. And somewhere out in that fog, whether it was David or something that looked like him, I swear we heard it circling the van, dragging something heavy and humming, a low, tuneless, childlike hum, like a nursery rhyme remembered wrong. We didn't sleep. At dawn, we stepped out, barely, and scanned the ground. No footprints, no shirt, no drag marks, nothing. David was gone. So was whatever had come to our van in the dark. We waited for hours, calling his name until our voices were raw. Tried the ranger station, but still no signal. Eventually, I drove 30 miles back to a visitor center with a satellite phone, filed a missing persons report. A sheriff took down the notes like it was just another hiker gone dumb and wandered off. They sent 2 volunteers out, but by the time the search started, it was already foggy again. Thick. Too thick. Jen and I were told to stay in the area in case David returned. We didn't argue, but we didn't stay at that pull-off either. Instead, we found a real campground, deeper in the hills but with other people nearby. Generators humming, smoke from campfires, laughter, talking. We thought being around others would help. It didn't. That night, as the stars came out and the embers of the campfires sank into silence, I sat at the edge of the van with a headlamp and a radio tuned to static just to hear something other than my thoughts. And that's when I saw the girl, just past the tree line, standing still, staring at me, and her eyes were all wrong. She looked maybe 10 years old, too thin, pale skin like she hadn't seen the sun in months, long, tangled hair that clung to her face in strips, but her clothes weren't dirty. They were just old, dated, like something from the 1960s. A faded blue dress with lace at the collar, white socks pulled too tight, black shoes that looked like they'd been stitched by hand. It was the kind of outfit no kid would wear out here. Not to play, not to hike. And her Ike. And her eyes. God, her eyes. Didn't blink. Just stared right into mine like she'd known I was going to look up in that exact moment. I didn't call out. Something in me recoiled at the thought. Like if I said her name, or any name, she'd come closer. Like the sound of a voice might break the invisible thread holding her just at the edge of the trees. I blinked, hard. When I opened my eyes again, she was gone. I didn't sleep that night either. Jen didn't even ask why. She just sat with her back to the wall, knees tucked up to her chest, watching the door. We didn't talk. We didn't move. We waited. The next day, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, that it was some other kid from a nearby tent, a prank or a trick of shadow. But deep down, I knew better. And I was already thinking of leaving. But I couldn't because they found David's boot, about a half-mile from the camp, wedged between 2 rocks, completely dry. No footprints, no sign of struggle. Just the boot, and something carved into the side of it, 4 small notches, and 1 long vertical slash, like someone or something was keeping count. The ranger who found it brought it to us personally. His name was Frank. Probably in his late 50s, weathered face, thick arms, kind eyes that didn't match the tremor in his voice. He crouched next to our fire pit and set the boot down gently, like it might shatter. Then he looked up at me. "You ever heard of the Cold Hollow disappearances?" he asked. I shook my head. He glanced around, made sure no one was within earshot, then said, 27 people, between 57 and 73, all in this region of the Appalachians, some campers, some hikers, a couple from a logging company, all vanished. Nothing left but a boot or a scrap of shirt or a pack with no food missing. You know what the papers said? What? He leaned in close. Nothing. They buried it, all of it. Tourism money talks. State contracts, too. You tell people the hills are haunted, they don't come back, and this whole stretch of mountain relies on those summer dollars. I stared at the boot, jaw tight. You think that's what's happening again? I think it never stopped, he said. It just waits. Jen had stepped away during the conversation, but I could see her at the edge of the clearing, back turned. Motionless. I stood. Thanks, Frank, really. He nodded, tipped his hat, and walked off slow, like someone who was used to carrying things nobody wanted to believe. I joined Jen near the tree line. She didn't look at me. Instead, she pointed. "I saw her too," she whispered. "The girl." My blood ran cold. "When?" "Last night. Just past the van. She waved at me." I wanted to say it was a trick, that we were both tired, sleep-deprived, paranoid, but that wasn't true anymore, and I couldn't fake it. "We need to leave," I said. She nodded slowly, but she didn't move. "Except," she added, "I don't think it lets people leave." That night, the humming came back. But this time, it was closer. Not outside. Inside. I jolted awake in the dark, and it was coming from the kitchenette. Soft. Crooked. Barely more than breath. But there, unmistakably. Jen stirred beside me, then sat up, eyes wide. We didn't speak. We just sat in the dark, listening, until the hum stopped, and something moved in the back cabinet. Not scratched. Not rattled. Shifted. Like something woke up. I reached for the flashlight with trembling fingers, turned it on, and swung the beam toward the kitchen drawers. Silence. Everything still. Then the flashlight flickered, and in that split second before it blinked out completely, we saw it. A hand. Pressed against the back cabinet wall, but not from inside the cabinet, from behind it, from the wall. The van shook. Once. Then nothing. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Frozen. Barely breathing. Waiting for another sound, another knock, another twitch of the flashlight. It never came. But the next morning, when we stepped outside, the forest had changed. Not in any way I could explain to a ranger or a cop or a search team. It was subtle but unmistakable. The trees were watching, not metaphorically, not poetically. Watching. Every shadow felt angled. Every branch felt poised. Even the birds were silent, like the whole forest was holding its breath. We packed up in 15 minutes flat. Didn't eat, didn't talk, just drove. The whole time we kept looking in the rearview mirror, expecting to see that girl in blue again. We didn't. But the silence followed us all the way to the next town. And the boot? It wasn't in the van. It had vanished, even though we never brought it out. The motel room smelled like bleach and mildew, but we didn't care. It had 4 walls, a door with a lock, and a bolt we checked every 10 minutes. We barely spoke, just sat on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the news. Or rather, the lack of it. David's name wasn't mentioned. No search effort, no press, like he hadn't just vanished 48 hours earlier. Jen finally broke the silence. "We should report it." "I tried," I said. "Park Service said they're looking into it, but the guy on the phone, he sounded tired, like he was reading from a script." She nodded slowly. "They're covering it up." We didn't argue. We didn't need to. We both knew. Something was wrong in those mountains, and the world didn't want to see it. That night, I dreamt of the girl. Not as a ghost, not as a spirit, but as something older. She stood in a field of tall grass that reached her waist, arms limp at her sides, eyes hollow but somehow aware. And behind her, something stirred, a shape in the fog. Towering. Wrong. I woke up choking, drenched in sweat. Jen wasn't in the bed. I shot up, heart pounding. "Jen!" The bathroom light was off. The front door cracked open. I rushed outside. She was sitting in the parking lot, cross-legged, staring at the sky. She didn't turn around when I spoke. "They don't come out here," she said. I crouched next to her. "Who doesn't?" Her voice was flat. "The things from the woods, they can't cross." I didn't ask how she knew. I just reached for her hand and found it ice cold. That was the last night we stayed near the mountains. The next morning we drove west. No destination, just away. The further we got from the trailhead, the lighter the air felt. As if the forest had been pressing down on us and we'd only just come up for air. But something stayed with us. It started small. Lights flickering in the RV, even after we changed the battery. Our clock resetting itself to 2:17 a.m. every night, exactly. Scratches on the outside of the rig that we hadn't noticed before. And then the whispering. Only at night. Only when one of us was alone. Faint. Garbled. Like wind through tall trees or children murmuring through static. We started sleeping in shifts, leaving lights on, locking the cabinets. And still, things moved. A spoon we never used would show up in the sink, wet, a drawer we never opened hanging half out in the morning, Once I found dirt in the shower, damp footprints leading out of it. But the scariest part wasn't the things we saw, it was the things we almost saw. A shadow just ducking behind a tree when we stopped for gas. A reflection in the mirror that lingered half a second too long. A voice that almost sounded like David's, calling from just outside the rig when we camped on the edge of a prairie in Tennessee. That night, we left the keys in the ignition and slept fully clothed. I didn't blink once until the sun rose. Weeks passed. We didn't talk about the mountains anymore. Didn't mention David or the girl or that thing behind the cabinet. But one night, Jen pulled a folded piece of paper from her jacket. She handed it to me without a word. It was a map, hand-drawn, torn from a ranger's guide, marked in red ink with a series of small X's, each one on the Appalachian Trail, each one near a campsite or logging road, each one labeled with a year, 1962, 1973, 1987, 1994, 2006, and then 23, our year, our campsite, our X. We never found out who made the map, but it matched Frank's story, matched the boot, matched the feeling that something was waiting in those woods and always had been. Jen traced her finger over the last X, then looked up at me. Do you think it picked us? I didn't answer because I didn't think it picked anyone. I think it waits for those who wander too far off trail, who get too curious, too alone, and once it has your scent, your fear, it follows. Not in body, but in presence. A mold in the corners of your thoughts, a shadow at the base of your dreams. Even now, as I say this, the lights flicker overhead. The air in this truck stop feels thicker than it should, like it's watching. I checked the time, 2:17 a.m. Always 2:17. There's one last thing I haven't told anyone. I recorded the humming. I don't remember hitting record, but when I checked my phone a week later, there it was, a 6-minute audio file. I played it once. And I swear to you, I heard David humming along. I still have it saved, but I'll never play it again because I don't think it's just sound. I think it's a door. And some doors are meant to stay closed. We didn't camp for a while after that. Stayed in motels, Walmart parking lots, even a friend's driveway for a bit. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just until we got our heads straight. But the truth was, I didn't trust the woods anymore. Not even the quiet ones, especially not the quiet ones, because there's a kind of silence that doesn't soothe. It listens, like it's waiting for you to speak first so it can answer. We had plans once, Glacier, Big Sur, Zion. But even the idea of being that isolated again made my stomach tighten. And then one afternoon, months later, Jen walked back to the RV holding 2 coffees and said, I had another dream. I looked at her hands. They were shaking. She told me she saw David again, only this time he wasn't lost. He was following something. She said it was leading him along the ridgeline, not towards safety, but toward a black patch in the trees where the sky bent wrong. And when she called out to him, he turned and smiled. His mouth was full of soil. We drove in silence the rest of the day. That night, I pulled the rig into a rest area near Kentucky. Not a forest in sight, just concrete, vending machines, and buzzing lights. I needed to know. I needed to understand why. Why us? Why David? Why so many names on that map? So I did what you're never supposed to do. I went looking. Online, mostly. Not in the woods, I wasn't that far gone, but forums, ranger message boards, old missing persons databases. And what I found was inconsistency, wrong dates, conflicting statements, photos that disappeared after 24 hours, threads that ended with users posting, never mind, it was nothing. Turns out it was just a misprint. Mods, please delete, like scrub them clean, except for one thread. Buried deep in a backpackers forum archived from 2007. A man from West Virginia. Username, Jackpine33. He posted 3 times. Saw a barefoot girl in the Monongahela National Forest. Thought she was a hiker. Then she turned, and I swear to God she didn't have eyes. Went back to look. Found my own boot nailed to a tree. I never left it there. If you hear humming, don't follow it. That was his last post. I tried messaging him. No reply. account long and active, but it felt like a warning, one he left behind for someone like me, someone dumb enough to ask questions but not dumb enough to go back in. I printed the post out, taped it to the cabinet by the stove. Next to it, I pinned a copy of the hand-drawn map Jen had shown me, a reminder of what we survived and what we almost didn't. Because here's the thing no one tells you about the Appalachian Mountains. They're old, not just in a geological sense, not just lots of erosion old. I mean, older than memory, older than names. And when something is that old, it doesn't forget the people who wander into its teeth. That forest doesn't care if you believe in ghosts or science or nothing at all. It doesn't care if you're spiritual, skeptical, brave, or broken. It doesn't need you to believe in it. It just needs you to be alone long enough to forget where the trail ends, long enough to think that hum in the distance might be a river, or a voice, or something calling your name. It only needs you once. I haven't told this story before now, partly because I didn't know how, but mostly because I was scared that saying it out loud would wake something up, that maybe by remembering too clearly I'd invite it back in. But if you're hearing this, then maybe you need the warning more than I need the silence. So here it is. If you're ever RV camping along the Appalachian Trail and you stop for the night near a grove that seems too quiet, if you hear humming in the dark, if you see a little girl with a boot that isn't hers, do not follow her. Don't ask her where she came from. Don't chase the noise. Don't investigate the shadow under the stairs or the humming inside the walls or the knock at your RV door at exactly 2:17 a.m. Because if you do, you won't come back the same. If you come back at all. There are places in these mountains where reality frays, where the line between the living and whatever came before us thins so much that it bleeds. And in those places, the forest doesn't just watch, it remembers and it takes. So next time you're out there, parked somewhere deep and wild and beautiful, enjoy it, breathe it in. But don't ever forget that you're a guest. And some guests aren't meant to stay. When I first drove north into the dense green of the Pacific Northwest, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for quiet. I'd been on the road for months by then. My RV, an old Winnebago I'd bought cheap and fixed up myself, had become more home than any apartment ever was. I wasn't chasing ghosts or monsters. I wasn't filming a documentary or looking to go viral. I just wanted space to think, space to breathe. That's what the Pacific Northwest promised: misty solitude, deep woods, soft rain on the roof while I slept. And for a while, it gave me exactly that. I found the site by accident. A Forest Service road near Mount Hood, one of those off-the-map clearings only known to locals and the occasional forum post. Someone had written, "Perfect free camping spot. Beautiful, but weird vibes at night." I should have listened to the last part. The road was unpaved and swallowed whole by trees. My cell signal dropped halfway up the hill. I didn't care. That was the point. I drove slowly, dodging potholes and fallen branches until the trees opened like curtains to a clearing maybe 30 yards wide. Moss-covered logs framed the edge. A small fire ring sat dead center. There were no other campers. No sound except the wind and the occasional snap of something moving through underbrush. I parked the RV with the windshield facing east toward a wall of dark pines that swayed but never broke open. I stayed 2 nights. The third night, that's when it started. But even before then, something felt off in a way I couldn't articulate. The forest didn't sound right. You get used to certain cadences in nature, the distant crack of a branch, bird song, the flutter of wings at dusk. This place was quiet in a smothered way, like everything was holding its breath. The second morning, I found strange impressions in the dirt outside the RV. Not tracks, not really, just heavy indents in the mossy soil. Deep, circular, too large to be hooves, too uniform for human feet. I told myself it was probably some odd erosion or maybe a bear. I even laughed about it, but I didn't step outside that night. I made tea, closed the blinds, locked the door. By the third evening, the clouds rolled in low and fast. The air got heavy, not just humid, but pressurized. I could feel it in my chest like the start of a panic attack. I remember watching condensation bead on the RV window, tracing my finger down the glass to break it. I didn't know why. Maybe I just needed to touch something. I heard it first around midnight. 3 knocks. Not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. 1, 2, 3. I froze. They came from the back of the RV, the rear door I never used. My first thought was rational. Maybe another camper had pulled in late and needed help. But my second thought was louder, sharper. No one saw you come up here. You're alone. I didn't move for maybe 10 minutes. No sound followed, no footsteps, no lights. I finally got the nerve to peek through the side blind. The clearing was empty, dark, silent. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the clearing. Nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a branch hit the metal. Maybe I dreamed it. I needed rest. But that night, the knocking came again. Same rhythm, same location. 1, 2, 3. Only this time, I swear I heard breathing after. Just the faintest exhale. It was enough to make me grab the bear spray. I crept through the RV in total silence, stepping over my boots and backpack like a burglar in my own home. I put my ear against the back wall. Nothing. Then, a whisper. Right on the other side. It wasn't words, not even a voice, just the suggestion of sound. Something close, intimate. That broke me. I backed away, heart slamming in my throat. I didn't open the door. I didn't sleep. And in the morning, when I finally stepped outside, the air smelled wrong. Not rotting, not sulfur, something subtler, the kind of smell you only recognize after the fact, like old hospitals, like the skin of someone you used to love. I checked the rear of the RV, 3 clean smudges on the aluminum, like someone or something had pressed their forehead against the metal. It was too deliberate to ignore. I thought about leaving. I should have. But there was a strange stubbornness that kept me rooted there. Like if I left, I'd be running not just from this place, but from something I didn't want to face in myself. I made coffee. I tried to feel normal. I played a podcast just to fill the silence. But the forest had changed. It felt aware. That's the only way I can put it. Like the trees were listening, like the wind was watching. And that night, the knocking didn't come, but the whispering did. Not outside this time, inside. Right behind the cabinet where I kept my coffee mugs. I sat at the small dinette, frozen, watching the cabinets vibrate softly, not from movement, from sound. Low. Continuous, like someone humming a tune only they remembered. I opened the cabinet, nothing there. No mice, no wind. Just a sudden cold draft that rolled out like breath from a crypt. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Just sat there, heart trying to claw its way out of my chest. And in that moment, I remembered something, a memory I hadn't touched in years. My brother and I, camping with our parents in Oregon when we were kids. We'd gone off trail and gotten lost. I remember him screaming my name over and over, his voice raw, cracking. I remember silence. I remember something standing between the trees that wasn't quite a person. That night came flooding back so vividly it felt like déjà vu. And I realized this place, this feeling, it was the same. That's when I started to really feel afraid. Not just nervous, not just uneasy. Afraid, because this wasn't new. It was familiar. And if it had followed me all this way, maybe I hadn't just found this place. Maybe it had been waiting. The next morning, I didn't open the door right away. I sat there hunched over my coffee, watching the steam rise and vanish like everything else I couldn't hold on to. The RV felt colder than it should have been. The heater was on, the thermostat steady, but the air had this edge to it like the cold you feel in funeral homes. Not a chill, exactly. A presence. And the worst part, I didn't feel watched. I felt remembered. When I finally opened the door, something had changed outside. I couldn't tell you what. The clearing looked the same moss-covered logs, same towering pines, but the light had shifted somehow, less vibrant, paler, like the forest had drained itself of color. I walked a slow circle around the RV, checked the tires, the undercarriage, the fire ring, the tree line. Nothing. No footprints, no smudges. Still that scent from the day before lingered. Hospital linen, old antiseptic. Grief in cotton form. I told myself I'd leave. I meant it. But I didn't turn the ignition. Instead, I packed up camp slowly, like someone buying time. I told myself it was just in my head, that it all seemed silly once I was back on the road. But that night, I stayed. Again. And I don't know why. Maybe it's like when you hear a strange noise in your house at night. You want to believe it's nothing. But part of you needs to be sure. You can't just run. That night, the whispering didn't come from inside the RV. It came from the woods. Far off at first, then closer. It was still too soft to make out. Not words, just tone. Like the forest was holding a conversation behind my back. Like it didn't need me to understand. It just needed me to listen. And I did. I turned off the lights. Sat in the dark. Window cracked just enough to hear. I could pick out 3 voices. Not literal, not human. But there were patterns, rises and falls, tension and release. One of them always ended with a hiss, like breath pushed through broken teeth. Then the knocking started again, but this time it was on the roof. 3 knocks, right above me. I looked up. I don't know why, like I expected to see it, whatever it was, pressing through the ceiling, reaching down through the fiberglass. I grabbed the flashlight, turned it on. Nothing. The sound stopped as soon as the beam lit up the ceiling. I shut it off, waited, and it came again. 1, 2, 3. Same rhythm, same intent. And I realized something else. It wasn't trying to get in. It was checking, like it already knew it had access. I slept in the driver's seat that night, keys in hand, didn't turn them, just held on. And when dawn broke, the forest looked even paler, almost sickly, like it had been up all night with me. I drove out of there that morning. Finally, gravel sprayed from under the tires as I left the clearing behind. But even miles later, back on paved roads, sun climbing up the windshield, I couldn't shake it. That feeling, like I wasn't alone in the RV, like something had gotten in. I told myself I was being paranoid, sleep deprived. I needed a real campsite with other people, showers, noise, light. So I drove west toward the coast, hoping the ocean would drown it out. I found a little campground near Tillamook. Families, fishermen, kids on bikes. The kind of place where you hear too much laughter and someone always burns the eggs. I parked next to a father-son duo in a pop-up trailer. We exchanged nods, didn't talk. But it helped, being near someone else. That night I slept with the window cracked, listening to the hum of life. I started to believe I'd imagined it all. Until the boy next door screamed. It happened around 2 a.m., one clean, piercing scream that jolted me upright. I rushed outside with a flashlight. The father was already holding his son, rocking him gently. The kid kept pointing at their trailer window, repeating one word over and over, knocking. I froze. The man looked up at me, pale, disoriented. Did you hear anything? I opened my mouth, closed it, shook my head. What could I say? That whatever followed me had found another door? I left that campground before dawn. Didn't pack properly. Left behind a folding chair and half my water. I just drove. Didn't stop until I hit the Olympic Peninsula. That's when the real silence began. The kind of silence that settles in your bones. Rain here isn't like other places. It's heavier, constant, like the sky's weeping for something it won't say. I parked off Highway 101, down a logging road near Hoh Rainforest. Remote, wet, green in a way that shouldn't feel threatening, but somehow does. The trees here are massive, thick with moss, limbs twisted like arthritic fingers. I didn't see anyone else for hours. By the second night, I stopped pretending I'd outrun it. I started hearing things again, a thump on the stairs, a whisper through the cabinets, and always that feeling that I wasn't the only one in the RV. But I couldn't see it. It didn't want to be seen. It wanted to be felt. The only time I felt halfway sane was when I stepped outside. Strange, right? You'd think I'd feel safer inside the RV, locks, walls, the illusion of control, but it was the opposite. Inside, the air felt stale, compressed, like someone else had been breathing it before me. And outside, even in the soaking Pacific air, I could at least feel alone. The forest didn't exactly welcome me, but it tolerated my presence. It didn't press like the RV did. Out there, the only sounds were rain dripping off leaves and the deep, ambient creak of trees swaying. That organic stillness, ancient and patient, like the woods had seen too much and learned not to care. I kept telling myself I just needed sleep. A few solid nights and the paranoia would fade. I even laughed once, out loud, trying to shake the tension off. I remember the sound felt wrong the second it left my mouth. Like the woods didn't like laughter, like it had never heard it before. The third night was when things shifted. I had taken a short walk before sunset, just up the logging road, soaking in the moss and fog and the distant call of some unseen bird. I kept thinking about how quiet it all was. Not just the absence of noise, but a vacuum. Like sound didn't carry here. It fell. I came back to the RV as dusk settled in. Everything looked the same. Same track marks, same slightly tilted satellite dish, same muddy boots by the door. But when I stepped inside, I paused. There were droplets of water on the floor. Not many, just a few. Leading from the door toward the back of the rig. I hadn't tracked them in. I was sure of that. My boots had stayed outside and the rain wasn't heavy enough to cause condensation. I wiped them up with a towel and told myself the ceiling had leaked. Then I checked. No leak. Dry as a bone. And yet, there they were again the next morning. New droplets. Only this time they led away from the bedroom, like someone or something had walked out. I didn't even bother trying to explain it to myself. I just sat on the edge of the bed, towel in hand, staring at those tiny wet ovals and feeling this pressure build behind my eyes. I hadn't cried in years, but I nearly did then, not from fear, from knowing it was only going to get worse. I could feel it. The RV had become something else, not a place, a vessel. And whatever had followed me from that first sight, it liked being inside. It liked being near. It wasn't rushing. It was settling in. That night, the dreams began. At first, I didn't realize they were dreams. I'd be standing in the narrow hallway between the kitchenette and the bathroom, light off, hearing movement in the back, like fabric being dragged slowly across the bed. Or I'd be outside the RV in the fog, watching myself through the windshield, except I wasn't me. It was all wrong. My face, expressionless. My hands, wet. And always the same whisper behind me, "It's in now." I'd wake up gasping, soaked in sweat, and the RV would feel like it had shrunk during the night. The walls pressing inward, the cabinets crooked, the air filled with a faint, cloying scent. Not antiseptic anymore. Something older, like wet earth and spoiled meat. I started sleeping in short shifts, lights on, knife under my pillow. I stopped cooking. The smell of food made the RV feel too full, like I was feeding something I couldn't see. And still, I stayed. I wish I could say I don't know why, but I do. It wasn't just fear. It was submission. You spend enough time in isolation, under pressure, with no anchor to reality, and your brain does something strange. It stops trying to escape. It tries to adapt. And that's what terrified me the most, that I was starting to make room for it. I even stopped reacting to the knocking. I'd hear it sometimes, middle of the day now, not just at night, on the roof, under the floor. Once on the fridge door, 3 slow knocks, always 3. Always measured. I didn't check anymore. I didn't grab the flashlight or open cabinets. I just froze and waited for it to end. But the worst moment, the one I've never told anyone, was the night I found the mirror breath. There's a little vanity mirror on the inside of the bathroom cabinet. Nothing special, just this oval thing I barely ever used. I went in to brush my teeth, half asleep, and when I opened the cabinet, there it was. A perfect oval of condensation, like someone had leaned in, exhaled, and then stepped away. But the thing is, the RV had been cold all day. The heater was off. There was no way that condensation should have formed. And even worse, the mirror was warm. Just the mirror. I pressed my hand to it and it was like touching skin. Slightly clammy, faintly pulsing, alive. I slept outside that night, under the awning, wrapped in 2 layers of flannel and a tarp. Didn't care about the cold or the mud or the fact that something kept pacing the gravel near the steps around 3 a.m. At least I could see the stars. What few poked through the clouds anyway. I left at dawn. No packing. Just turned the key and drove. Didn't even retract the stabilizers. Let them drag until the first bend in the road. I headed north. Didn't know where, just away. But the thing about the Pacific Northwest is you don't run out of trees. You just trade one forest for another, and some of them are older, hungrier. I kept thinking that if I just moved far enough, whatever I'd picked up would fall away. Like mud on tires, like smoke on clothes. I told myself I was being dramatic, that the woods had gotten to me, and that's all. I'd hit a psychological breaking point. Cabin fever in a rolling cabin. So I drove until I found another small, quiet campground just outside Olympic National Park. Gravel pull-ins. No hookups. One other rig at the far end of the loop. I didn't talk to the owners. I didn't wave. I parked beneath a thick canopy of fir and sat in the driver's seat until the sun disappeared behind the tree line. The silence here felt different. Not comforting, but clinical. Like the woods were holding their breath. I stayed anyway. That first night, I refused to sleep inside. I set up a camping chair outside the RV, bundled in 2 coats, flashlight between my knees. I sat facing the tree line, as if daring whatever was out there to step closer. Nothing did. No knocks. No breath on glass. Just an owl, eventually. A lone hoot that sounded almost mechanical, like it had forgotten why it hooted. I nodded off a few times, chin against my chest. Each time I jerked awake, my flashlight had rotated slightly in the chair. I kept telling myself I must have bumped it. The third time, the light was off entirely. I hadn't touched it. And when I clicked it back on, I saw them. Footprints. Human-sized. Barefoot, coming from the woods, stopping less than 6 feet from me. Not going back. Just ending. No broken twigs, no signs of struggle, just 2 imprints in the pine needles pressed deep into the soil like whoever stood there had watched me. For how long, I couldn't tell. I packed up the chair and went inside, trembling harder than I ever had in my life. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I locked every single latch in the RV. Even the pointless ones, the tiny slide bolts on the cupboards, the microwave strap, the fridge buckle, as if that mattered. I didn't sleep. I sat in the middle of the rig, legs crossed, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. The RV creaked and moaned around me like an old man shifting in bed. At 2:46 a.m., I heard breathing. It wasn't outside. It wasn't even in the walls. It was behind me. I turned too fast, expecting to see something, anything. Shadows, movement, a reflection in the microwave glass, but there was nothing. Just the sound. Slow, wet inhalations, right up against my left ear. My skin crawled, my stomach turned, and for the first time I spoke. Just one word. Please. It slipped out without thought, half a whisper, half a prayer, and as soon as I said it, the breathing stopped. I sat in silence for what must have been an hour. No more sounds, no movement. Then, faintly, so faint I thought I'd imagined it, I heard a response. Almost done. That voice, it didn't sound angry or cruel. It sounded tired. I didn't know what to do with that. Was it comforting? Horrifying? Had it been doing something to me all this time, eroding me like water on stone? I didn't want to know. I drove again the next morning. No breakfast, no cleanup, just keys, ignition, motion. I started sticking to well-lit campgrounds, RV parks with security lights and visible neighbors. I parked near retired couples who waved too much and cooked bacon at 7 a.m. And for a while, things got better. The knocking stopped, the mirrors stayed cold, but I couldn't relax because I kept seeing it in other people. Little signs, the subtle tells, a man in a folding chair staring just a little too long at the same patch of trees, a woman running her hands over the hood of her RV as if it had something underneath the surface. One night, I saw a guy outside his camper just talking to the side paneling. Not drunk, not high, calm, serious, like it was a conversation. And I started to realize this thing, whatever it wasn't just me. It moved, like a sickness, like a traveling shadow that slipped between rigs when no one was looking. It liked the ones who stayed quiet, who isolated, who listened more than they spoke. People like me. So I started forcing myself to talk to strangers. I sat at picnic tables and joined group fire pits even when I didn't feel like it. I waved. I smiled. I lied about how good I was sleeping, and it worked. Somewhat. The silence inside the RV never felt safe again, but it stopped pressing, stopped whispering. But here's the thing. Even after weeks of light and conversation and clinging to normalcy, I still hear it sometimes. When the generator cuts out and the dark gets too thick, when the fog rolls in and the windows cloud over, I hear that breathing, that patient, hungry breath, like it's waiting, not outside, not under, inside me now. It found a place, and I wonder, maybe that's what it wanted all along. Not to haunt, to inhabit. And every time I move to a new site, I wonder, who's next? Who's going to pick the same lonely corner of the forest? Who's going to walk barefoot through the pine needles and never come back out? I used to love the Pacific Northwest, the fog, the trees, the quiet, but now I know what lives underneath it. Not a creature, not a ghost, just absence. A hollow thing with infinite patience and a voice that waits until you're almost broken, just to say, almost done. I don't know what made me come back. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't still afraid. But I was. The fear had just learned to wear a mask, one made of movement and new campgrounds and daylight routines. But underneath, it still breathed. 2 months had passed since the night I heard that voice. And even though I'd kept busy parks and well-lit pullouts, I could feel the edges of something fraying again. I started waking up before my alarms. 5 minutes before, then 10, then 20, and always at exactly 2:46 a.m. My phone would glow without a sound. I wouldn't remember setting an alarm. Sometimes it wasn't even on the screen. Just the time pulsing in that eerie blue. 2:46. The moment I heard it breathe. I should have left the Northwest, gone south, crossed a border. But I stayed. And eventually, I did what you're never supposed to do when something sinister gives you silence. I got curious. I looked back through my old photos, the ones I'd taken during those early weeks of travel, back when the road felt like freedom and not escape. And I saw something I hadn't noticed before. In a shot of my rig parked beside a mossy trailhead in the distance framed by trees, there was a shape. Tall. Pale. Not quite human. Just standing there, barely visible between trunks. Like it hadn't wanted to be seen, but hadn't tried very hard to hide either. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't even clear, it could have been a sun-bleached tree or a smudge, but I knew it wasn't, because I remembered that day. And I remembered the feeling, like I was being watched. I stared at the photo for hours, zoomed in, zoomed out. Eventually, I just left it open on my tablet, propped up against the kitchenette counter like a window I was afraid to close. It became a kind of sick ritual. Every night, I'd check the photo, and then I'd go to sleep with every curtain shut and every latch locked, knowing it didn't matter, because I wasn't keeping anything out. I was keeping myself in. That's what it wanted. Not to hurt, to contain. I began dreaming of trees, not walking through them, but being buried in them, rooted, bound, watching from the dark as others parked above me lit their campfires, toasted marshmallows, and all the while, I was underneath, waiting for them to stop laughing, waiting for them to feel alone. That's what the Pacific Northwest does to you. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and eventually you start whispering back. I didn't realize how far I'd slipped until I caught myself doing it, muttering under my breath without knowing the words. Not prayers, not ramblings, just syllables that didn't feel like my own. I'd be dumping my gray tank, or brushing my teeth, or making coffee quiet moments, and I'd hear it, coming from me. Almost, no more, wait, soon. I tried recording myself, thinking maybe it was all in my head, but the recordings came back blank, silent, except once. Just once. At the very end of a 4-minute voice note, when I thought I'd said nothing at all, there was a faint click, like a latch, and then a whisper. Now you see. I deleted it immediately, threw the phone across the RV, but it didn't shatter. It just landed face down, screen still glowing. 2:46 a.m., I left the campground that morning, drove east, fast, didn't care where, just wanted to put miles between me and the coast. But that's the thing about the Pacific Northwest. It follows. The mist, the silence, the rot smell under the ferns. It's not just a place, it's a direction, a pull. And no matter how far I drove, the trees kept leaning in. I found myself circling back toward the Olympic Peninsula without meaning to. The GPS didn't correct me. The sun never quite moved right in the sky. I started seeing the same rusted road signs, the same crows on the same mile markers, and I swear, one night, I saw my own damn RV parked ahead of me. I slammed the brakes, flashed my lights, and just like that, it was gone. No tire tracks, no noise, just mist curling off the pavement like it had been breathing there, waiting. I should have abandoned the RV. I should have walked. But where? To what? I think that's what it wants in the end. Not to scare you, not to break you, to blur you, to make you forget where the edge is between you and it. So when you finally stop, when you finally surrender, you don't even notice that it's not you breathing anymore. It is, through you. And the worst part is, I think I'm already there. Because lately, I've started watching people at other campsites the way it watched me. Silently, curiously. Wondering how long they'll last before they hear it too, before they whisper back, before they say, please. The hardest part was realizing I no longer wanted to leave. I told myself I did. I packed. I made plans. Traced routes that curved south out of the peninsula into dry places where the sky opens up and you can see things coming. But every time I tried, something stopped me. A downed tree, a washout, a road closed sign that hadn't been there the day before. Once, it was a full caravan of park rangers waving me back from a controlled burn. No smoke, no fire, just faces behind mirrored sunglasses motionless except for the fingers pointing toward the nearest forest road. Another time, my GPS simply spun in place, blinking red, and my phone screen bled static for 30 straight minutes. That's when I realized I wasn't driving away anymore. I was circling something, orbiting, like it had a gravity now, and I was too worn down to resist. I started to forget what town I'd last fueled up in, or how long I'd been out here. The food didn't taste like anything anymore. The water smelled like wet pennies, and even when I was parked in the open, under bright daylight, it felt like dusk. Like some veil had fallen over my windows, dimming everything by a few notches. Then, one morning, I woke up to find the RV door cracked open, just a sliver, just enough to let in the smell. Damp pine, cold ash. I checked the locks, still latched. I checked the trail cam I'd strapped to the bumper. The battery was dead. I sat in the driver's seat with my hands gripping the wheel for 3 hours. Never started the engine. Just sat there, listening. You'd think I'd have left that moment, driven until I hit a coast or a cliff. But I didn't. I stayed. And that night, I finally saw it. Not a shadow, not a glimpse, not something caught in a photo or a dream. I saw it. I'd set up camp a little farther into a trail system I didn't recognize. No markers, no numbered posts, just a clearing like a throat in the trees wrapped in fog that never fully lifted. The kind of place you know was cleared, not found. I hadn't even meant to stop there. The van had just slowed on its own. No warning light, no mechanical noise. It just decided, and I obeyed. At some point that night, I opened the door and stepped out barefoot. Didn't remember doing it. Didn't feel cold. The moss underfoot was warm and wet like breath. And there it was, across the clearing, tall, still, pale, no features, just shape. Like a thought that had taken on form but hadn't figured out how to finish itself. And worse than seeing it, it saw me back. No eyes, but I felt it. A kind of gentle folding in my ribs, like it was touching my lungs from the inside. No pain, no violence, just inquiry. And I did the thing you do when you're a child and you're caught in a lie. I smiled. I actually smiled, not out of comfort, not out of recognition, but submission. Like it had finally broken something open in me. And I wanted it to stay. I don't know how long we stood like that. When I blinked again, the sun was up. My feet were black with soil. There were fern spores dusting my face, and the RV door was still wide open. But nothing inside was touched, except the mirror. Someone, or something, had run a single wet finger down the center, cutting a line through the condensation. And on the inside, below the streak, 3 words were written in dust. We are near. That's when I realized something awful. I wasn't alone anymore. Not just watched. Not just haunted, occupied. A part of it had come with me, in the way the shadows lingered half a beat too long, in the sound of the faucet dripping, even when I hadn't used it, in the growing weight behind my own thoughts, like there was a second voice now, not louder, not demanding, just present and patient. Sometimes I'd think a thing and feel it nod, not with joy, but approval. I started avoiding other campers, not out of fear for myself, but fear of myself. What if I passed this on? What if all it needed was a look, a word, a whisper? So I stopped talking altogether, stopped waving at people, stopped logging into forums or texting old friends. I became a ghost in a shell of a man, drifting through the woods in a vehicle I no longer trusted, along roads I didn't choose. And still, somewhere under all that decay, I loved it. The quiet, the stillness, the simplicity of being claimed by something vast and unknowable, because at least it meant I didn't have to keep pretending to be okay. The Pacific Northwest doesn't care about your performance. It strips it away. It peels. It rots. It remembers. And that's what finally broke me. Not the visions, not the voice, the fact that I understood it, and even worse, that it understood me. The next time I saw another human, I didn't speak. I was parked near a logging road somewhere east of Mount Rainier, surrounded by massive firs that pressed in close on all sides. The rain was soft, almost ceremonial, tapping on the RV's roof like slow applause. A younger couple had pulled in late, headlights barely piercing the thick fog. I watched them from behind the curtain, barely breathing. They were laughing, unaware. She reached for his hand as they walked toward their tent, swaying slightly, tipsy or just tired. And for one sick, aching moment, I wanted to warn them, tell them to leave, that this place changes you, that nothing here stays untouched. But instead, I just watched, because the truth was, I envied them. Not their joy, not their love, their ignorance, that soft shield of not knowing what stares back when you leave the firelight. They still had that, and I didn't. Later that night, I woke to the sound of something scratching along the side of my RV. Not claws, not nails. It was deliberate, almost as if someone were tracing lines, letters. I stayed still, eyes open, watching the shadows stretch long across the ceiling. Eventually, the noise stopped, and the silence that followed was somehow worse. Because now I knew it was right outside. Not pacing, not lurking, waiting. And when I finally dared to look out the small window above the sink, I saw the girl from the tent, but she wasn't moving. She was just standing, staring. Her face was wrong. Not injured, not bloodied, just still. Too still. Like the muscles had forgotten how to arrange themselves into anything human. Her arms hung at her sides, limp. Her mouth was slightly open as if trying to remember speech. I almost opened the door. Almost. But something in me, something new, held me back. Not out of fear, out of instinct. She wasn't there to be saved. She'd already been taken, and the thing that had taken her, it wanted me to see what came next. But I turned away, and when I looked again, she was gone. In the morning, the couple was packing up. The guy moved quickly, throwing gear into the car. The girl never made eye contact, just stood near the tree line, arms crossed. He kept asking if she was okay, if she slept all right. She didn't answer. When they pulled out, I noticed the passenger window was down, even in the rain. She stuck one hand out, palm up, fingers splayed, as if testing something or welcoming it. I never saw them again. But that image stuck with me, her hand outstretched, collecting the rain like it was something sacred. After that, I started driving longer stretches, trying to outrun whatever was tethered to me. But the woods never changed. No matter how far I went, they always knew me. It was in the way the fog gathered in front of my headlights, how my tires found roads that weren't on any map, how birds stopped singing whenever I stepped outside, like the world had learned to hold its breath around me. One afternoon, I found a small ranger station, weather-beaten, empty. But the front door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled of mildew and long-decayed paper. I don't know why I went in. Maybe I was looking for proof that I hadn't dreamed it all, that there were still signs of other people. Or maybe I hoped someone somewhere had seen what I'd seen. On the back wall, there was a bulletin board, old notices, trail maps, missing person flyers, yellowed with age, and one note, handwritten, tacked to the center with a rusted nail. If you feel it watching you, you're already too late. No name, no date, just that. I stared at it for a long time, long enough to feel the pressure in my skull begin to rise, like the air around me had thickened. I left. I didn't take a picture. Didn't bring the note, but I didn't need to. The words had already etched themselves into me. And after that, things got worse. I started dreaming of roots, not metaphorically, actual roots, wrapping around my ankles, threading into my skin, pulling me down, and each time I woke, I swore I could still feel them. Phantom pressure along my calves, a tingling beneath the soles of my feet. I stopped sleeping for more than an hour at a time. Started hearing soft humming from the back of the RV. Not a tune, just tone. Low, constant. And when I pressed my ear to the floor, I could feel it vibrating like the woods had grown a voice, and it had settled underneath me. By then, I was barely functioning. I'd stopped checking in with anyone, didn't even know if I had service anymore. Gas stations blurred into one another. Faces became scenery. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a vessel, a hollow, moving thing, drifting between moss and fog and silence. Until the night I saw the fire. Not mine. It was small, tucked into a bend near a narrow road, too far in to be safe, too close to something else, and standing next to it, a man. He wasn't dressed for the weather, no gear, no tent, just jeans and a wool sweater soaked through with rain. He didn't wave, didn't speak, just stood there with one hand extended, palm up, fingers splayed, just like the girl. As I passed, our eyes met, and I swear he recognized me, not as a person, as something else, like we'd both passed through the same invisible door and neither of us had made it back. I drove until dawn, didn't stop, didn't look in the mirrors because I knew whatever was following me, it wasn't behind me anymore. It was with me. There's a difference between being alone and being left. It took me weeks to understand that. In the beginning, I told myself I was just solo traveling. Now I knew better. The woods hadn't just watched me. They had claimed me. Whatever I'd stepped into, whatever invisible line I crossed back near that first campground, had never let go. And the more I resisted, the deeper it pulled. I started losing time, not in dramatic blackouts, but in strange, half-remembered stretches. I'd pull off to rest and look up to find the sun in a completely different place in the sky. I'd pass a landmark, double back, and it wouldn't be there anymore. And sometimes I'd find things inside the RV I didn't remember buying. A pine cone nestled in the sink. Wet mud across the floor in long, dragging streaks. One morning, I woke up with the taste of blood in my mouth and a small splinter lodged beneath my thumbnail. No injuries, no explanation, just that dull, persistent wrongness. And still, I kept driving, because part of me hoped there was still a line I could cross again, back the other way. A place where the world went back to the way it used to be, where the trees were just trees, and shadows didn't whisper your name when the wind blew just right. I thought maybe if I could just get out of the Pacific Northwest entirely, if I could cross some invisible state line, it would lose its grip. I headed east, through Idaho, then Montana, long stretches of highway, wide plains, less rain, and still, everywhere I went, the feeling followed. It wasn't the woods anymore. It was inside me. One morning in Montana, I parked near a small bluff overlooking a lake. The view was calm, beautiful. There were families down by the shoreline, kids laughing, dogs barking. I watched them through the windshield like I was behind glass, like I didn't belong in their world anymore. A young boy, maybe 8 or 9, broke away from his family and wandered up toward the bluff where I was parked. He was chasing something in the air. A butterfly, maybe, or a bird. He paused about 10 feet from my RV and looked straight at me, and then he stopped smiling. His head tilted, his eyes narrowed, and then he backed away slowly, not scared, just disturbed, like he'd seen something he couldn't name. And in that moment, I realized children recognize things adults pretend not to see. He didn't know what I was, only that I wasn't right, that something about me was off, like milk just starting to sour. That was the last time I parked near anyone. After that, I sought isolation. Deep forest roads, unmarked turnoffs, spots where even the GPS gave up. It felt safer that way, not for me, for everyone else, because whatever was tethered to me, it was still growing, still changing me. It wasn't loud, it wasn't monstrous, it was patient, whispering things into the corners of my mind until I couldn't tell which thoughts were mine and which ones were planted. And then one night, somewhere deep in the Cascades, I woke to a sound I hadn't heard in months. Knocking. Soft. Measured. 3 taps. I sat up in bed, heart slamming, held my breath. Another knock. This time closer. It wasn't at the door, it was under me, beneath the RV, right under the floorboards. Like someone or something was lying flat on their back, tapping up from the dirt. I didn't move. Couldn't. I just sat there, pulse screaming in my ears, while that knock came again. Then silence. Then scraping, slow, circular. A fingertip, maybe. Tracing shapes. I pressed my hands over my ears, not because of the sound, but because I could feel it. In my teeth. Like a tuning fork buried in bone. When it finally stopped, I didn't sleep. I just waited for dawn. And when the sky lightened, I climbed out and looked beneath the RV. The ground was undisturbed, no footprints, no marks, just a perfectly round circle in the dirt, about the size of a dinner plate, drawn with something sharp. And inside it, a symbol I didn't recognize. But my body did. My knees buckled the second I saw it, not from fear, from recognition. Some part of me knew what it meant, even if my conscious mind refused to say the words. That was the moment I stopped running, not because I gave up, because I understood you can't outrun something once it's inside you. Whatever was out there, whatever waits in the trees and fog and quiet hollows of the Pacific Northwest, it doesn't just haunt, it infects. And I had been patient zero. I started recording myself after that. Not for YouTube, not for an audience, for me. To remember that I had once been human, that my voice had once been steady, clear, that I hadn't always spoken in half sentences and stared too long at the moon. But even the recordings started to shift, voices in the background, subtle distortions. One night I played back a clip I didn't remember recording, and my voice wasn't my own. It was deeper, slower, repeating the same sentence over and over. It lives in the roots. It lives in the roots. It lives in the roots. I deleted the file, but it didn't go away. Every night after that, I heard it softly, through the floor, through the trees, in the static of the radio, even when it wasn't on. I stopped trying to understand it. Some things aren't meant to be solved, only survived. So I did the only thing left. I returned, back to the first campground, the one near the Olympic Peninsula, where it all began. I didn't go to confront it or break the curse. I went because deep down I knew it never left that place. It just followed. And maybe if I went back, I could bargain with it or offer myself in full, let it finish whatever it had started. When I arrived, it was dusk, same gravel lot, same whispering trees, even the moss felt familiar. And there, in the same spot I'd parked months ago, a new RV, no lights inside, no movement, just waiting. I sat in my driver's seat, hands shaking, unsure whether to leave or knock. But before I could decide, the door opened, and a woman stepped out, mid-30s, tired eyes, and a look I recognized instantly. Not fear, recognition. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. She looked at me the way the boy had, the way I had once looked at myself in the mirror. And in that silence between us, we understood there's something here, something older, something that doesn't kill. It absorbs. And once you've felt its breath, once its roots brush your mind, you're part of it. Forever. We sat across from each other on tree stumps, the woman and I, the fire between us barely keeping the cold at bay. I hadn't built it. It was already there, burning low like someone had just fed it and walked away. She never gave me her name. I didn't ask for it. What we shared was something older than names, a knowledge you don't pass down. You just carry. She stared into the flames with that distant look, the same one I'd seen in my own eyes too many times, the look of someone waiting to wake up from a dream that never ends. Eventually she spoke. I thought if I came back here, maybe it would leave me alone. Her voice was dry, hollowed out, the kind of voice you get when you've talked to yourself for weeks. I nodded, because I understood. Coming back doesn't make it stop. It just confirms that it's real. You hear it too? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I was listening. To the trees, to the silence around us that was never truly silent, to the way the fire cracked unnaturally, too evenly like a metronome. Then I said, I don't think it ever stops. We just get used to it. She looked up at me and something shifted in her face. Not relief, but the quiet dread of finding out you're not crazy, just cursed. It started after my husband went missing, she said, right after we parked here the first night. I left the RV for 5 minutes to get firewood. When I came back, he was gone. Just gone. No struggle, no blood, nothing. I felt my stomach clench. She didn't know it yet, but she was further down the path than I had been. She hadn't just seen it. She'd lost to it. She rubbed her hands together, fingers trembling. I waited 3 days. I walked the entire loop trail twice. I even called search and rescue. They found no signs. Nothing. I gave up and drove home, but even there, it followed. She looked at me, eyes brimming but refusing to cry. I hear his voice sometimes, not saying anything, just breathing, right behind me. I swallowed hard. My own memory echoed her words. The breathing, the sense of being watched from inside your own skin. I wanted to tell her the truth, that I didn't think we could ever go back to who we were before, but I couldn't. She already knew. So instead, I said the only thing I could. You're not alone. We sat in silence after that. 2 people suspended in something neither of us had a name for. Eventually, she rose and walked back into her RV. The fire sputtered down to coals, but I didn't move. I just stared into the dark, watching the spaces between the trees, listening, waiting. And that's when I realized I didn't want to leave anymore. Not because I felt peace, because I didn't want to bring this thing any further into the world. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like somehow I'd been leaking it, dropping pieces of it like breadcrumbs across the country, every stop, every campground, like it was using me to spread. And if I kept moving, I'd only give it more ground. I'd infect someone else. The boy on the bluff, the woman by the lake, the gas station attendant who stared too long and blinked too little. I'd left pieces behind, and now they were living in others. That night, I climbed onto the roof of my RV with a blanket and sat under the stars. The cold was clean up there, the moon sharp and bright. The trees below swayed gently like they were breathing together, one organism, rooted and humming in quiet agreement. And I whispered to no one, I know what you are now. It wasn't a threat or a challenge, it was respect. Because I'd come to understand something deeper than fear. Whatever lived in the Pacific Northwest forests, it wasn't malicious in the human sense. It wasn't a ghost or a cryptid or a demon. It was pattern, a force, a memory buried in soil and bark and fog, and I had become a vessel for it. Maybe not the first, definitely not the last, but for now, the one who knew. I woke at dawn with frost on my eyelashes and the weight of that understanding heavy on my chest. The woman's RV was gone. No tire tracks, no warmth in the fire pit, as if she'd never been there. Or maybe I was the one who vanished. I started walking. No direction, no destination, just into the trees. The fog gathered quickly, too quickly, curling low to the ground like it had been waiting. Every step felt familiar, like I'd walked it in a dream. And after a while, I reached a clearing I hadn't remembered, though I must have passed it dozens of times. The earth was soft beneath my boots, too soft, like something had been tilled. I knelt down and touched it, and the scent hit me instantly. Wet earth, moss, and something else, something older, like the breath of a cave that's been sealed for centuries. I pressed my hand into the soil, and it accepted me. I don't know how long I stayed there, kneeling in that strange hollow. But when I rose, something inside me had settled. The noise in my head had quieted. The thing that had been pressing from within, it no longer fought me. We'd made peace, or worse, merged. That's when I decided to record this. What you're hearing now, a warning, a confession, maybe both. Because if you're listening and you've felt it too, the pull, the watching, the thing that waits in the stillness, you need to know it doesn't want to kill you. It wants to remember itself through you. And once you feel it, once you let it in, you don't walk away. You become the woods. I left the forest eventually. At least, my body did. I drove the RV down winding roads that felt newly carved, even though I'd driven them a dozen times before. Trees pressed in from both sides like they were leaning down to whisper things I was too tired to hear. I passed small towns with shuttered diners, gas stations too clean to be real, people who looked up from their porches like they recognized me, but couldn't say from where. Or maybe they were waiting for me to recognize them. I don't know how much time passed after that. Days blurred. I stopped trying to measure it. Sleep came in short, static, laced bursts. The line between dream and waking thinned to the width of a thread. And through it all, the Pacific Northwest stayed with me, not just in memory, in presence. Every pine needle stuck in the tread of my tires. Every scrap of moss that clung to my boots, no matter how many times I scrubbed them clean. Every time I turned off the engine and let the silence settle, it came crawling back like mist under the door. Sometimes I'd wake in places I didn't remember driving to. A lake. A gravel turnout beside a canyon. A mountain pass road with no guardrail and no reason for me to be there, and always that feeling. That alignment. Like I was exactly where it wanted me. Once I found something on the RV window, handprinted. A handprint, small, child-sized. But the fingers were too long, too narrow, almost elegant. It was on the inside. I remember staring at it for what must have been hours, not moving, not blinking, just tracing the shape of it with my eyes and wondering, was that always part of me? There's a terror deeper than fear. It's not the scream, not the flight, not the gut punch realization that something is wrong. It's the stillness that comes after. When you accept that wrong is now the default, that your version of normal was just a brief illusion granted to you out of mercy. I started driving only at night, less people, less mirrors, less risk of seeing something looking back. But even then, the forest found ways to remind me, the smell of sap in the middle of a desert, the sound of branches snapping when there were no trees for miles, a single raven perched on my side mirror for 40 minutes of highway, staring. I never tried to swat it away. I think it was waiting to see what I'd do. Some nights I'd stop in empty rest areas and leave the RV door open. I'd light a candle and sit by it like I was welcoming something in, not summoning, not challenging, just acknowledging. I don't think it needs permission, but I think it appreciates the gesture and the dreams. God, the dreams. I'd wake up on damp forest floor with my hands covered in soil, taste pine needles in my mouth. Once I woke to find a line of ants crawling across my chest in perfect formation. I watched them for an hour, let them march without brushing them away. It felt deserved. There's no one left in my life to warn, no one who'd understand. And honestly, I don't want to warn anyone anymore. Because I think maybe that's the point. The more I tried to fight it, understand it, the deeper it pulled me under. But now that I've stopped resisting, it's quiet. And the quiet, it's beautiful. I understand now what the woman at the lake meant, why she came back, not because she was haunted, because she'd already become part of it. She just hadn't accepted it yet. Now I have. And in that acceptance, there's peace. But peace doesn't mean safety. It doesn't mean I'm okay. It means I know what I am. I'm not lost. I'm held by trees older than memory, by soil that remembers every footstep, by shadows that know your name before you speak it. The Pacific Northwest isn't haunted. It is the haunting, a slow, silent recursion of time and grief and memory. It wears no face, carries no weapon, needs no name. It doesn't need to chase you. It just waits for your quietest moment, for the version of you that breaks. And when that crack forms, it seeps in like cold fog through a thin coat. And once it's inside, it doesn't scream. It remembers. And so do you. You remember things that never happened, trails you never hiked, whispers you never heard, but somehow always knew. And if you're still listening to this, I need you to ask yourself something. Right now. When you're alone, when the lights are low and the silence deepens just a little more than it should, ask yourself, truthfully, have you already been there? Not physically, but in dreams, in strange déjà vu, in that moment where the wind shifts and smells like rain and wood smoke and your stomach tightens for no reason at all. Because if you have, then you already know. You don't find the Pacific Northwest, it finds you. And when it does, you're never truly alone again, even when you want to be, even when you drive and drive and drive. It's there, waiting, remembering, becoming you. They say the Midwest is quiet, nothing but cornfields, winding highways, and wide skies. But I can tell you now that stillness can hide things. It can smother the sound of something moving just outside the edge of your vision. It can lull you into thinking you're safe, right up until the moment you realize you're not. It started with a detour. We weren't even supposed to be in Missouri. We'd planned for the Rockies, somewhere in Colorado, chasing cooler nights and thinner crowds, but a slow leak in the rear tire forced us off course outside of Kansas City, and I figured, why not? The Volkswagen still had half a tank. I'd heard about some free campgrounds off the smaller highways through central Missouri. Hidden gems, people called them. I thought we'd find solitude. Peace. We found something else. It was just me and Jess, my girlfriend of 4 years. We'd bought the '74 Volkswagen Westphalia as a fixer-upper, poured our savings into it, and spent months on the road that summer. Some couples drift apart traveling. We didn't. If anything, we were closer out there than we'd ever been back home in Chicago. Life was simple in the van. You cook, you drive, you sleep, and in the silence between destinations, you learn who you're really with. That day had been long. Too much sun and a dead stretch of highway that seemed to bend forever through farmland. I remember Jess had her feet on the dash, flipping through our battered Rand McNally, hunting for that little green tent symbol that marked the free sites. We were way off the main interstate, chasing cell signal ghosts and secondhand advice from a gas station clerk. "There's one here," she said, tracing her finger toward a speck of green deep in a patch of nowhere. "Danby Hollow." "Danby Hollow?" I said. "That sounds haunted," she grinned. "All the best places do." We found it around dusk. You wouldn't see it unless you were looking. A narrow, overgrown turnoff with a rotted wooden sign that simply said, Danby Hollow Camp. The road in was gravel and potholes. The trees were thick, pressing in so tight you had to keep the headlights on even before nightfall. When the trees finally opened, we saw it. A clearing maybe the size of a football field, surrounded on all sides by hills thick with trees. There were 6 designated sites, just wood posts with fading numbers carved into them. All were empty, no ranger station, no fees, no other cars, just an outhouse half swallowed by weeds and a rusted water pump with a bent handle. Jess stepped out and stretched. "Perfect," she said. I wasn't so sure. Something felt off. It wasn't one big thing. It was a cluster of tiny details that didn't sit right. The silence wasn't natural. No birds, no wind, no cicadas, just the faint hum of the van's engine cooling. The air felt wrong. Not heavy or cold, just stagnant, like the place hadn't breathed in years. We parked in Site 4. Ate canned chili heated on the propane stove, cracked open a couple of beers, and watched the stars appear. I tried to shake the feeling, but my skin itched like I was being watched. Jess, though, was relaxed. She always loved the more remote sites, said they felt more authentic. We climbed into the pop top around 10. She fell asleep easily. I didn't. The first knock came around midnight. Not on the door, not on the window, on the ground. A distinct, rhythmic thump, like someone was tapping on the dirt with a cane or a stick, 3 times. Then silence. I sat up, held my breath, listened. Nothing. I opened the zipper window and looked out. Darkness. No movement. I leaned closer, trying to adjust to the night, and that's when I saw it, just past the edge of our fire ring. Something shifted behind a tree. Just a flicker of motion. Could have been an animal. Could have been nothing. Could have been. I laid back down and stared at the ceiling. Heart pounding, telling myself it was a raccoon or a deer. But something in me, the part that grew up camping in Wisconsin and knew the difference between natural quiet and wrong quiet, was screaming. The second night was worse. We stayed because Jess said it was fine, and I didn't want to admit I was scared. We'd both grown up around the Midwest, flat plains, forgotten towns, spooky legends, but she always thought I let my imagination run too far when we were deep in the woods. I didn't want her thinking I was soft, so we stayed. The day passed uneventfully. We hiked a narrow ridge trail that circled the campground, no cell service anywhere, not even one bar. I tried to check the compass on my phone's map, but it wouldn't load. Not just the map, the compass. It spun, erratic, pointed in different directions each time I looked. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke to Jess shaking me. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I held still, straining, and then I heard it. A soft voice, so faint I couldn't make out the words. Male, maybe older, speaking slowly, almost like a chant, not shouting, not conversational, just repeating something. Jess crawled to the window and peered out. "There's someone in Site 6, she said. I joined her, and there was a figure, standing perfectly still in the center of the empty fire ring. No tent, no vehicle, just him, facing the woods unmoving. No flashlight, no fire, no gear, just a man. We couldn't see his face. He must have hiked in late, I said, my voice shaky. But I didn't believe that. He stood like that for over an hour. We watched, unsure what to do. Every few minutes, his head would tilt like he was listening. Then the whispering would begin again. I couldn't understand the words, but they crawled up my spine like static. Around 3:30, he walked straight into the woods and didn't come back. I wanted to leave at first light. Jess didn't. She thought it was weird, but not dangerous. I tried to explain that something felt wrong, that this place wasn't like other campgrounds. But how do you explain a feeling? She said maybe the guy was homeless, or a local playing some weird prank. We don't even know he did anything wrong, she said. And that was true. But we stayed a third night, because we'd learned, somewhere along the road, not to leave out of fear. We thought we were smarter than that, tougher than that. We thought fear was just a shadow you walk through. That third night, fear stepped out of the shadows. It started with a smell. Not something obvious, not the kind of stench that forces you to gag. This was faint, familiar in the worst way, like rot wrapped in wet burlap, something you'd smell in an old shed where something died long ago and no one bothered to check. It filtered in through the cracked windows of the van just after midnight, and it hit so gradually I didn't notice until my eyes were already open. Jess was still asleep beside me, breathing steady. I sat up, rubbed my face, and stared out into the clearing. That's when I saw them. 3 figures, not the man from Site 6. These were smaller, shorter. Children, maybe, barefoot. Their outlines were hunched and strange. The moon was low, only partially lighting the clearing, but they weren't moving like kids. They were walking in circles. Tight, jerking circles around our fire ring. No light, no sound, no rhythm, just walking. I don't know how long I watched them. Long enough for the stench to get stronger. Long enough for the hair on the back of my neck to rise and stay risen. And then one of them stopped, turned slowly, and looked directly at me through the van window. I froze. I couldn't see a face, just the shape of it, the wrong shape. Its head was too long or too low, I don't know. But the proportions were wrong, like someone had stretched a child too far or folded an adult down into something smaller. The other 2 figures stopped and turned too. All 3 stared. No eyes, no expression, just silhouettes. I didn't wake Jess. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I moved, I'd break whatever spell kept them outside. Maybe I thought they'd go away, but they didn't. They stood there unmoving for the rest of the night. At some point, I fell asleep sitting up, heart pounding, eyes dry. When morning came, they were gone. I jumped out of the van the second the sun hit the clearing, ran to the spot around the fire ring. Nothing. No footprints, no drag marks, just dirt and a single piece of torn cloth snagged on a root. Blue. Faded. Child-sized. Jess came out behind me, rubbing her eyes. "What are you doing?" she asked. I held up the cloth. "Did you hear anything last night?" She shook her head. "No, you look like hell." I didn't tell her. Not yet. We made coffee and sat in silence, and then we heard it, a long, low moan from deep in the woods, like an animal in pain, but not like any I'd ever heard. Too deep to be a deer, too distorted for a coyote. It echoed across the hills, bouncing through the trees in a way that didn't sound natural. Jess froze. What the hell was that? I didn't answer. My mouth was dry. My thoughts were spinning. I told her about the figures, the smell, the way they stared. She didn't doubt me, not completely, but she said we were both tired, that maybe I dreamt part of it, that maybe it was one of those sleep paralysis things. I asked if sleep paralysis stinks like death. She didn't have an answer. We packed up fast, didn't even finish breakfast. We were out of there by 9 a.m., tires crunching over gravel as we made for the exit. That's when we saw it. The man from Site 6, standing in the middle of the road, same posture, same silence. He hadn't moved in 2 days, but now he stood directly in front of our van. Jess hit the brakes. We stared at him through the windshield. He didn't flinch. Back up, I said. We'll go around. But as soon as she shifted into reverse, we heard it again. The moan. Closer this time, and then another, and another. The trees behind us moved, not from wind, from something coming toward us. Jess floored it. The man didn't move. I screamed. Hit him! She swerved instead, veering off the road and jostling the van through tall weeds and shallow ditches. We missed him by inches. I looked out the passenger window and locked eyes with him as we passed. He smiled. But it wasn't human. The smile stretched too wide. The skin around his mouth cracked, split, like the grin was too much for his face to hold. And then he was gone. We didn't stop driving for hours, not until we hit a Walmart parking lot 50 miles west. We parked between two semis and just sat there, breathing. I didn't know what we'd seen. I didn't know how to explain it, but I knew we'd barely gotten out. I thought that would be the end. But the Midwest isn't just one place. It's a patchwork of open land and backwoods, of forgotten hollows and stories too old to be remembered clearly. That wasn't the end. It was the beginning, because something had followed us. We stayed at that Walmart lot for 2 nights. Didn't move, didn't talk much. Just kept the van locked, windows cracked, and the curtains drawn. We slept in shifts. Jess kept the pepper spray under her pillow. I had a hunting knife tucked into my sleeping bag, though I wasn't sure what good it would do if that thing ever came close again. On the second night, I had a dream. No, not a dream. A memory, maybe. One that didn't belong to me. I was standing in a cornfield. The stalks were taller than they should have been, towering over me like a wall. I could hear something brushing through them, something wet and heavy, moving in circles. Always in circles. And I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just watched as a shadow passed just out of sight, dragging something behind it, something that whimpered like a dying dog. Then the whisper came. It wasn't a voice, not really, more like a vibration in my head, a frequency meant for bone instead of ears. You're not supposed to leave. I woke up choking, not gasping, choking. Jess was shaking me, panicked, yelling my name. I was clawing at my throat, but nothing was there. No pressure, no obstruction, just the sensation of being throttled from the inside. I couldn't breathe. Then, just like that, it stopped. Air rushed in. My chest heaved. The van smelled like burnt hair and mildew. I stared at Jess, and she looked back with a kind of horror that wasn't just about what had happened, but what she'd seen. I heard it too, she said, barely above a whisper. That was when we decided to leave the Midwest. Just go. No plans, no stops. Just drive until the road ran out or the air felt clean again. We headed south, following the long sweep of back highways, avoiding interstates and overpasses. The countryside rolled by in dull waves, cornfields, rusted mailboxes, dead birds on the shoulder. We were somewhere outside Cairo, Illinois, real deep southern tip, when we saw the boy. He was maybe 9, thin, pale. Standing alone on the side of the road next to a barbed wire fence. No backpack, no bike, no adults in sight. He didn't wave. He didn't wave, didn't move, just stared. I told Jess not to stop. She didn't listen. She pulled over and rolled the window down halfway. Hey there, she called out gently. Are you lost? The boy didn't respond. His eyes were huge, black. Not dark, black. Too black. I leaned across her and said, we can call someone for you. That's when he smiled. Same as the man back at the campsite. That wrong smile, too wide, too dry, like something old trying to remember how a mouth works. I slammed my hand on the window controls and rolled it up. Jess stared at me. "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just told her to drive. Fast. Yeah. As we pulled away, the rearview mirror caught him again. He hadn't moved. But now there were 3 more just like him, standing behind the fence, spaced perfectly apart. Jess was trembling. "I don't want to drive anymore," she said. I nodded. "Then I will." We didn't talk again until we crossed into Missouri. Even then, the only sound in the van was the constant buzz of the engine and the dull, sick feeling of something dragging behind us like a tether. It didn't make sense. I couldn't rationalize it, couldn't bury it in logic or coincidence like I'd done with other strange experiences over the years. Because this wasn't just one place. One campground, one bad night. This was spreading. It was like something had latched onto us back in that forest. Something ancient. Something that didn't care about roads or state lines or fences. It was using the quiet corners of the Midwest as a conduit, moving through forgotten towns and dying farmland, and we'd become part of its path. At a rest stop outside Jefferson City, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my own face in the mirror for a long time. I looked hollow. My eyes had sunk deep into their sockets, my skin was drawn tight, and my stubble looked like it had been growing for weeks, not days. I touched my cheek, and for a second I swore I felt something squirm beneath the skin, like a twitch or a pulse that didn't belong. I splashed water on my face. Again, that's when I saw it, scrawled in faint black ink on the stall behind me. "You're still there!" I turned so fast I nearly slipped. No one was there. I ran back to the van. Jess didn't ask. She just opened the door and let me in. We both knew now. This wasn't random. This wasn't about where we camped. It was about us. We kept moving. Days blurred. I stopped marking the calendar. Jess quit checking her phone. We didn't even bother charging it anymore unless we had to get gas or find food. The van felt more like a coffin on wheels than a shelter. Every campground we passed gave us both a gut-deep sense of nausea. It was like we could smell whatever wasn't right about them, like damp soil hiding something freshly buried. At one point, outside a gas station in rural Oklahoma, I saw a woman sitting on the curb, middle-aged, dirt under her fingernails, barefoot, knees tucked up to her chest. She was rocking back and forth, whispering something I couldn't hear. Just as we passed, her head snapped up and she looked right at me and said, "Loud enough to cut through the glass, you took it with you." She didn't follow us, didn't move, but the look in her eyes, that wasn't madness, that was understanding, recognition, like she knew what was riding in the dark corners of our van. That night, we finally cracked. We tried to sleep in an open parking lot behind a shuttered drive-in theater. Moonless sky, dead quiet. We thought we'd be safe there, far from trees, far from trails, far from campgrounds. Jess dozed off first. I was still awake when the tapping started. Not loud, just a soft tick-tick-tick, like fingernails on aluminum, coming from the rear hatch, rhythmic, unhurried. I didn't move. I just laid there, sweat sticking my back to the mattress, heart pounding so hard I thought it would shake the glass. Then the whisper came again. This time I heard it. Not a dream, not a memory, a voice from just outside the van. "You're still inside." Not, "You're still there." No, "You're still inside." I don't know why that hit me so hard, but it did. Because the truth was I hadn't left that forest. Not really. Some part of me, maybe the scared part, the guilty part, the part that didn't believe I deserved to leave, it stayed. And now, whatever was in there with us, it knew. I sat up slowly, reached for the knife. The blade trembled in my hand. Jess stirred. "What is it?" she whispered, barely awake. I didn't answer. I just held up a finger, listening. The tapping stopped. Silence stretched out, long, unnatural. Then, just as suddenly, the van rocked, like something massive had slammed into it from the side. Jess screamed. I lunged forward, scrambling for the driver's seat. The van shook again. Harder. Something was climbing it. You know that metal-on-metal creak when weight shifts on a roof not meant to carry it? That's what we heard. Something was up there. I threw the van into drive and hit the gas. We peeled out, tires squealing, gravel flying. The van fishtailed wildly before finding grip. I didn't care about direction, I just needed distance. I kept driving until I couldn't see the parking lot behind us anymore. And still, we heard it. Something dragging across the roof. Slowly, deliberately. Then nothing. Gone. We didn't speak again until dawn. Not a word, just silence between us and the long stretch of empty road. When the sun rose, we pulled over on the side of a narrow farm road and got out, both of us barely able to stand. I expected to find scratches on the roof. Dents. Anything. Instead, we found footprints. Not normal ones. Not bare feet or boots. Hooves. Three-toed. Burned into the metal, as if whatever had stood on top of our van had heat inside it. Jess fell to her knees and vomited in the grass. I don't blame her. I wanted to do the same. Later that day, after we'd calmed down enough to think again, we sat in the front seats, just staring out at the endless stretch of nothing. I broke the silence. We need to go back. Jess's head whipped toward me. What? Not to the same place, I said, but somewhere near it. It's like we left something open, like we didn't finish whatever this is. You want to go back into that? No, I said, but I think we already did. Every time we park, it finds us. Maybe it's not about leaving. Maybe it's about understanding it, facing it. Jess was shaking her head. You sound just like that woman, like everyone we've seen since this started. I think maybe they weren't crazy. She didn't answer. But that night, she didn't object when I turned the van northeast, back toward the Midwest, back toward the silence. We didn't have a plan, just a direction. We stuck mostly to back roads, avoiding highways, skipping over familiar landmarks, circling the map like we were orbiting something we weren't quite ready to name. Jess barely spoke. I only drove. And in between us hung this weight. Not just fear, but expectation. It was waiting for us. We knew that. We just didn't know where. 3 days passed in a kind of sunburned trance. The van held the smell of our sweat, of damp clothes, and coffee gone cold. My hands gripped the wheel so long I forgot what it felt like to let them go. We stopped in a ghost town somewhere in Missouri. Main Street empty, windows blown out, old gas pumps leaning sideways like they'd tried to fall asleep decades ago. That's when it started again. We were parked under a faded Welcome Hunters sign, eating peanut butter out of a jar when a shape passed across the windshield. No footsteps, no wind, just a shadow. Jess dropped her spoon. It clattered to the floor. I reached slowly into the glove box and pulled out the small digital camera we'd barely touched the whole trip. I want to document this, I whispered. Whatever this is. Jess didn't respond. She just opened the door, stepped out of the van, and started walking. Jess, what are you doing? There's something back here, she said without turning. Something waiting. I followed her down a side alley between a burned-out laundromat and an old Masonic lodge. Cracked pavement, weeds up to our knees, a door barely hanging on its hinges opened into darkness. Jess stepped inside. My mouth was dry, my legs didn't want to move, but I followed her. Inside was cold. Not just colder than outside, cold, like a walk-in freezer with the hum turned off. The place was empty, except for a single wooden chair in the center of the room. Facing the wall, a faded red symbol spray-painted above it, some kind of eye, or spiral, or open mouth, I couldn't quite tell. Jess walked straight to the chair and stood behind it. She didn't sit, she just whispered, "It followed you first." I froze. What? You heard it before I did, back at the first campground. You heard the voice, the whisper. Jess, how do you know that? Because I heard it too, she said. Later, and I think it wants one of us to stay. I didn't like where this was going. I backed toward the door, camera shaking in my hands. We're not playing into this. We don't know what this is. She turned around, her face pale, eyes glassy, and then she said something that has never left me. I don't think we brought it with us. Pause. I think we left a part of ourselves behind, and now it's trying to find its way back. The floor creaked beneath me, and then, from above, from inside the walls, from nowhere, Not joyful laughter, not even mocking, just dry, breathless, rust-flavored, like something was amused that we'd finally begun to understand. I grabbed Jess's arm and pulled her out of that place, back into the sunlight, into the heat, into the wind. We didn't talk again for hours. That night, camped behind an abandoned silo, we set up our chairs in a loose circle around the fire. Jess didn't sleep. Neither did I. And the fire crackled but didn't feel warm. Then at exactly 3:12 a.m., a scream pierced the silence. Not human, not animal. It was ourselves, or something that knew how to sound like us. I heard Jess's voice, clear as day, calling from the silo. "Come quick, help me." But Jess was beside me, frozen, staring. And then we heard me. "Jess, over here," coming from the trees. Something had our voices. Something was repeating us. I couldn't take it. I stood, shining my flashlight toward the woods. Nothing. But when I turned back, Jess was gone. The fire flickered, choking itself. The air tightened around me. I shouted her name. Only silence. Then, the camera in my pocket vibrated. I pulled it out. One new video. I didn't remember hitting record. I played it. The screen showed footage of me, sleeping, in the van, face slack, chest rising and falling. A whisper, soft and garbled, played under the video. "We are waiting. We are watching. You don't remember us, but we remember you." I dropped the camera. Not on purpose. My hand just let go, like my body had made a decision before my brain could catch up. The whisper was still in my ears, even with the screen off, like it had wormed its way into my head and refused to leave. I backed up slowly, eyes sweeping the tree line. "Jess?" I called out. "Jess, this isn't funny." But I didn't believe it was a joke. Not anymore. Not after the silo, not after the video, not after hearing my own voice coming from somewhere else. I turned in a slow circle, heart pounding like it was trying to shake loose from my ribs. The van was there. The fire still hissed in the dirt. But Jess was gone, and the night was holding its breath. I stepped toward the silo, flashlight trembling in my hand. It wasn't just rusted and old, it looked violated. Graffiti scrawled up its spine, half-erased symbols, crude outlines of bodies. The door hung open like a crooked jaw. My light flicked across the concrete floor, catching shadows that moved even when I didn't. "Jess?" I called again. Softer now, not wanting to wake anything else. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Old soil, copper, mildew, something rotting in the walls. Then, from the darkness, "I'm here." But it wasn't her voice. Not exactly. It was trying to be. I raised the flashlight, sweeping it around in a panic. And there she was, crouched in the corner, eyes wide, breathing fast, dirty streaks down her cheeks. I rushed over. "Jess, Jesus, are you okay?" She didn't move, just whispered, "Don't turn off the light." That's when I saw it. On the back wall, scratched deep into the concrete, was that same spiral, that eye, that mouth. But this time something else had been added. Our names. Mine first, then hers. Etched in what looked like fingernail scratches. Right beneath them, a third name. Wesley. I didn't know any Wesley. I looked at Jess. "That wasn't there before," she whispered. "When I came in here, it wrote itself." Suddenly, I remembered the man in the woods, the one I saw at the first sight, crouching beside our fire, who vanished before morning. I hadn't told Jess about him. At the time, I'd convinced myself he was just a trick of the light. But the name chilled me. Wesley. A name I had no memory of, but which felt burned into me. We left the silo without speaking, drove for hours through back roads that didn't have names, past towns that didn't show up on maps. Every gas station we stopped at was boarded up or abandoned. The sky was too still. Even the radio was silent. Every station, dead air. We camped that night beside an overgrown stretch of forest near the Iowa border. The sun was gone by the time we stopped. I killed the engine and leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. Jess sat beside me, staring out the window. "I think it's playing with us," she said. I didn't answer, because she was right. We were being led, herded, not just by fear, but by invitation. Something wanted us to keep moving, keep searching. It was guiding us like a string through a maze, and we were too numb, too desperate to cut it. That night, I dreamed of voices, not whispering anymore, just calling. Wesley. Wesley, Wesley, over and over, first as a chant, Then eventually, as a plea, I woke up gasping, soaked in sweat, fists clenched so tight my fingernails left bloody crescents in my palms. Jess was already awake, sitting up, holding the camera. She looked at me without blinking. It recorded again. She turned the screen toward me. Footage of her this time, sleeping, tossing. The camera zoomed slowly toward her face like someone had been holding it, breathing just off screen. Then the voice again, raspier, closer. You chose this? Come back to where it began. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. We backtracked to the first campground. It took almost a full day. By the time we arrived, the sun was setting behind the same trees that had once felt like safety. The trail looked narrower, the trees taller, and there, where our fire had once been, stood something we hadn't noticed before. A stone pillar, about waist high, covered in moss. It hadn't been there last time, or maybe it had, and we just couldn't see it. Etched into its face, the same spiral, the same mouth, and beneath it, 3 names. Mine, Jess's, Wesley, and this time a date, not in the past, in the future. 2 days from now. Jess looked at me. Her voice cracked. What happens in 2 days? I didn't know, but I was terrified to find out. We didn't sleep that night. How could we? The van felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in, and every creak of the old suspension sounded like footsteps just outside. Jess sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, arms wrapped tight, eyes staring at the sliding door like something might knock at any second. I held the camera in my lap. I hadn't pressed record, but the red light was on anyway. I turned it toward the windshield, expecting to catch something, someone, standing out there in the clearing. But it was just trees, too still, too quiet, like even the wind didn't want to move anymore. At 3:11 a.m., the van lights flickered. Not the battery. The overhead dome light. Jess flinched. I reached up, turned the switch off entirely, sat back, and then it happened. A soft tapping on the glass. Driver's side window. We both froze. Tap, tap, tap. Slow. Deliberate, not asking for attention, announcing presence. I turned. Slowly. There was no one there, just the dark, but the window bore something new. A smudge. Greasy, almost fingerprint-shaped. As if someone or something had pressed their hand against the glass. Except it wasn't a handprint. It was a spiral. We left in silence, didn't speak for hours as we drove. I don't even remember the gas stations. I remember white lines, fences, sky, and eventually I remember the hills, low, rolling, empty farmland somewhere in central Missouri, and a billboard half-faded that read, "Returning to where it began, you're almost home." We pulled over, gravel crunching under the van's tires. Jess broke the silence. What if Wesley isn't a person? I didn't respond. She continued, what if it's a version of us? Something that happened here, something we forgot, or buried, something we left behind. I looked at her, heart thudding. You think we did something? She just nodded. Then pointed toward a dirt road that veered off into the hills. It was narrow, one of those roads that looked like it hadn't seen a car in years. No signs, just that subtle curve into the earth, winding into a thicket of skeletal trees. We followed it. Branches scraped the top of the van, dust clung to the windshield, and then as the road narrowed into little more than a rut, we saw it. A house. Old. Sagging. Swallowed by vines and time. Wood so dry it looked like one good storm would send it all crashing in. Jess whispered, I've been here before. My stomach dropped. So have I. We parked. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was loaded, pressurized. Like even the dirt was holding something down. We approached the front door together. The handle was rusted. The door creaked open like it had been waiting for us. Inside was darkness and dust, a fireplace, a mirror cracked in two. A clock stopped at 3:11, and on the far wall in a child's scrawl, Wesley lives here now. I turned to Jess. She was already walking toward the back of the house, and I followed. The hallway was narrow and cold. The air somehow damp despite the dry boards, and then we saw the door, half open, something painted on the front in the same spiral shape, only more frantic now, as if done in a panic, again and again, carving into the wood. Jess reached for the knob. I grabbed her wrist. Are you sure? She nodded. We opened it. A single room, bare floor, one window shattered. And in the center, a hatch, metal, bolted shut with chains and a padlock so rusted it looked like it might disintegrate from touch alone. But the chains were cut, and the hatch was cracked open. Inside, stairs, descending into earth. I stared down into the black. It felt like looking into a mouth again, a throat, breathing, waiting. And then there it was. The voice, not a whisper, a scream, not from above, from below. Help! Jess and I both jumped back, but something inside me, some part of me that wasn't afraid anymore, leaned in. I looked at her, eyes wide, trembling. If there's someone down there? Jess said nothing, but she didn't stop me when I started down the stairs. Each step groaned. The air got colder, wet, heavy with iron, and when I reached the bottom, I saw it. A room. No bigger than a closet. And in the center, curled into himself, was a man, thin, pale, eyes wide with terror. He looked up as I stepped into the light, and he whispered, "You finally made it." I didn't recognize him. Not at first. His face was sunken, skin pale, stretched over sharp cheekbones, hair matted, lips cracked. He looked like he hadn't seen light in years. But his voice, that voice grabbed something ancient inside me. "You don't remember?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My tongue felt dry. My thoughts, too loud. Jess stepped into the hatch behind me, flashlight in hand. He flinched like a wounded animal and crawled backward until his spine hit the far wall. He wasn't chained, but he didn't move, like the air itself held him there. "I'm Wesley," he rasped. "No," I said. "Wesley's in all of us," he said. "You left me here." His eyes locked onto mine, and something cracked inside me, because I remembered, not a moment, not a place, a feeling. That summer, the one when everything fell apart and we drove this same VW across state lines just to run. Jess and I weren't even speaking. We had fights that lasted entire states. Her father was sick. I'd lost my job. We thought the open road would clear things up. It didn't. We came through Missouri, and for one night, just one, we stopped near this ridge, this clearing, this exact place. I remembered the trees now, the strange fog that rolled in. The night we both blacked out after a bottle of cheap whiskey and the stars spinning above us like they were draining down a hole in the sky. We woke up in the van, but something wasn't right. We had a note taped to the steering wheel. It just said, "Don't look back." I thought Jess had written it. She thought I had, but we never spoke of it again until now. And now Wesley was here, in the earth. Waiting. Jess crouched next to me. She didn't cry, didn't run. She reached out and touched his hand. He recoiled, then stilled. I asked, "What do you want?" He smiled, barely, not a smile of joy. A release. To be free. I felt a chill surge through my spine. He wasn't chained physically. He was held by memory, by denial, by the things we refused to face back then. Our grief, our silence, our fear. "I'm you," he said softly. "The part you abandoned to keep moving." And suddenly I understood. This wasn't supernatural, not in the way we thought. Wesley wasn't a demon or ghost. Wesley was a manifestation. The name we gave to what we refused to carry when life got hard. He was what we buried in our minds when we slammed the van into drive and left Missouri in the rear view. And now the loop was closing. "I don't want to forget anymore," I whispered. The room around us shifted. Almost imperceptibly, like a breath held for too long, was finally released. Jess helped Wesley to his feet. He was shaking, not from fear, but from effort. Step by step, we brought him back up those stairs, into the light, into the morning. The hatch creaked behind us as the wind kicked up through the trees. The house began to groan, boards shifting, windows vibrating like an old train pulling away. We didn't stay. We got in the van. And for a long time, we didn't speak, until Jess finally said, "Do you think we'll forget again?" I looked in the rear view. Wesley wasn't there, just a shadow between two trees. "I don't think it works like that," I said. "I think we finally accepted something, and now we carry it." She nodded slowly, and then smiled. Not a happy smile, a true one. As we drove, the Midwest stretched out around us, those endless fields, sky painted in faded blues and early sun, but it felt different now, like the land wasn't watching anymore, like it had finally let us go. We crossed the state line by noon, didn't celebrate it, didn't mark the moment. It felt wrong to pretend anything had ended, because what we went through back there, it didn't close like a chapter. It just changed shape. The farther we drove, the more that haunting pressure in my chest lightened, not gone, but diluted. I could breathe deeper. My grip on the wheel softened. Jess sat with one leg tucked up under her, staring out the window like she was watching a place she just left in a dream. The VW hummed along the two-lane road like nothing had happened, like it hadn't been the vessel for something we couldn't explain. But it had. It always had. And deep down, I think the van knew. That old interior, stained and sun-bleached, had carried versions of us for years. When we were younger, reckless. When we ran from pain. When we chased some fantasy of open road healing without ever facing what broke us in the first place. Now it felt like we weren't passengers anymore. We were witnesses. We stopped for gas in a town called Banner, one of those places with a single stop sign and a general store older than color television. I grabbed a couple drinks from the cooler. Jess found a local map by the register, and then something strange happened. The woman behind the counter, maybe in her 70s, looked at me with these pale, glassy eyes and said, "You drove the Volkswagen, didn't you?" I froze. Jess turned sharply. "I saw it once," the woman went on. "Back in '89, same ridge. I was just a girl. My brother went missing near that hollow. Nobody believed me when I said something came out of the trees, something wearing his face." My hands tightened on the drinks. Jess stepped forward. "Did he come back?" The woman smiled sadly. "No, but a part of me stayed behind with him." We stood there in silence. The old floor fan thumped as it oscillated. She slid our map back toward us. "You're lucky," she said. "Most folks never make it back down that hill. The ones that do, they see things different after." "Different how?" I asked. "You stop blaming the dark for what you buried." We drove for hours after that, barely speaking, each of us chasing thoughts too big to catch. But that night, we camped near a lake in Nebraska, not out of fear, but because it felt right. No ghost towns, no forgotten trails, just still water, crickets, and fireflies in the reeds. Jess made a small fire while I sat on the roof of the van, legs dangling off the side. The sky was vast, bigger than anything we'd driven under. The stars looked clearer now. Not kinder, just honest. "You ever think," Jess said from below, "that some places don't trap you? They just wait for you to be ready to remember." I let that sit with me, because I knew now that our memory of Missouri, of that first trip, wasn't gone. It had been waiting, buried under distractions, under excuses, under that steady hum of forward motion we convinced ourselves was healing. But healing isn't movement. It's confrontation. And sometimes the road has to bring you back before it can move you forward. That night, we didn't lock the doors. We didn't keep watch. We let the woods speak if they wanted to, but they were quiet, and that quiet wasn't threatening anymore. It was peace, the kind you earn, not the kind you pretend. Morning came slow and golden. I woke with Jess's head on my shoulder, the lake mist curling through the air like a soft whisper. I looked at our van, our rusted, noble van, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Gratitude, not just for surviving, but for the truth, for facing what we left behind, for walking back into the dark and carrying what we found into the light. Volkswagen camping stories, they're not just about freedom or nostalgia, not always about beauty or escape. Sometimes they're about return, about what you meet out there when the map turns blank, about who you become when you listen to the land and let it show you who you've been avoiding. If you ever find yourself out in the Midwest, alone or with someone you love, and you come across a ridge that makes your breath go still, don't ignore it. Stop, step out, feel it. Not all ghosts are dead. Some are just waiting for you to stop running. And if you're lucky, if you're willing, you'll find a piece of yourself up there in the hills, where the cornfield breathes and the trees remember your name. And this time, you won't leave without it. It was never the darkness that scared me. It was the silence. You'd think, after all the solo trips I've taken in my Volkswagen Westphalia, I'd be used to it by now. The long drives, the empty roads, the eerie stillness of nature when night falls and the stars hang like frozen sparks above the pines. But no matter how many times I parked under a blanket of stars, far from any trace of civilization, it was always the quiet that reached into my chest and twisted. Last October, I took what was supposed to be a simple, soul-resetting trip. Just me, my Westie, and the Colorado high country before the snows buried it for the year. I wanted peace, isolation. I got exactly that, but it came with a price I'm still not sure I paid in full. I left Denver on a crisp Monday morning. The sky was autumn blue, the air dry, and the peaks already had streaks of white at their crowns. The plan was simple. Head west, take a few turns off the beaten path, find one of those quiet Bureau of Land Management roads with no signs, no campers, and no phone signal. I wasn't looking for a campground. I was looking for that special kind of emptiness only the Rockies can offer. The kind that swallows you whole and makes you feel small in a way that's strangely healing. By late afternoon, I'd passed a sign for a forest access road near Leadville, veered off the main drag, and followed a dirt path for what must have been 12 miles. The road was rough but manageable, potholes the size of moon craters and washboard ruts that made my teeth buzz. But my Westie handled it like she always does, steady and stubborn. I had to drive with the windows cracked open because the elevation climb made my ears pop, and I was already feeling that thin, dry air in my lungs. Just before sunset, I found a clearing, wide open, ringed by old aspen and lodgepole pine. No other vehicles, no trail markers, no sounds beyond the breeze playing in the branches. It was perfect. I parked with the sliding door facing the trees, the last light bleeding orange behind the ridge. I popped the top, pulled out my camping stove, made instant coffee, and heated a can of black bean chili. Nothing special, just something warm. The temperature dropped fast once the sun vanished. I bundled into my fleece, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and listened to the crackle of pine needles beneath the hooves of something moving just out of sight. A deer, probably, or a moose. It was common up here, but I didn't see anything. I didn't think too much of it then. That first night started out like all the others. I set up my little solar lantern, locked up my gear, and climbed into the top bunk with my sleeping bag zipped to my chin. The air was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. You know that sound your ears make when you're somewhere truly silent? That low, ringing hum that almost feels like it's coming from inside your head? That's all I heard. For a long time, that's all I heard. Then, a knock. I froze. Not on the van, not on the windows, not on the door, somewhere out in the trees. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks, like someone hitting wood against wood. Rhythmic, intentional, too far off to see, too close to ignore. I sat up in the bunk, heart hammering, listened hard. Nothing, no follow-up, no voice, no footsteps. Just the breeze again, just the ringing in my ears. I told myself it was a branch falling. Maybe a tree limb had cracked and hit another on the way down. That happens out here. Deadfall all the time. I laid back down, tried to breathe slow, tried not to imagine shapes outside the thin metal shell of the Westie. Sometime after midnight, I fell asleep, and in my sleep, I dreamed someone was standing outside the van, just watching, not moving, just breathing. The kind of dream that makes your limbs feel full of wet sand, where you can't move, can't scream, just lie there with your eyes wide and your chest tight. When I woke up, it was still dark, no sign anyone had been there. But the dream had scratched something loose in me, a quiet unease that lingered all through breakfast and stayed in my shadow as I packed up. I told myself it was just nerves. Isolation will do that to you. When the world gets too quiet, your brain tries to fill the gaps. But the next night, that changed. That second day, I hiked a little, just short trails off the road, nothing serious. I brought my bear spray, kept my phone in airplane mode just in case I picked up GPS reception on a high ridge. It was beautiful, honestly, the kind of solitude I'd been craving. High alpine meadows, groves of golden aspen, the sound of a creek somewhere always just out of view. Still, I never saw another human being. and I should have found that peaceful. Instead, it made the silence deeper, like it had weight, like it had shape. I went back to the van that afternoon and just sat for a long time, drinking lukewarm coffee and listening, not for anything specific, just listening. At dusk, I heard the knocks again, this time closer. 3 of them, same pattern, same sound, not a fallen branch, not some animal, something, someone, knocking. It came from down the slope beyond the trees where the light died first. I thought about calling out, asking if anyone was there, but the words stuck in my throat, because I realized something. No one knew where I was. No one. I hadn't dropped a pin, hadn't texted a friend, hadn't seen a soul in 48 hours. If something happened, if someone was out there, I was completely alone. And still, I waited. I waited, sitting in the open sliding doorway of my van, my eyes fixed on that tree line, my flashlight in one hand and my stomach crawling. Nothing moved. No reply, no footsteps, just the knocking fading back into memory like it had never happened at all. I slid the door shut, locked it. Every latch, every window. I even brought my bear spray into the bunk with me. Not that it would help much against whatever this was. That night, I didn't sleep, and the van, my sanctuary, my safe place, suddenly felt like a coffin. I didn't know it then, but the knocks were only the beginning. The warning. The real horror was waiting for me the next night. The next morning, I stepped outside the van like I was stepping onto thin ice. Every sound felt too sharp. The wind in the trees had a hiss to it, like breath through clenched teeth. I walked the perimeter of my camp with the bear spray in hand, looking for, I don't even know what. Prints? Footsteps? Something to confirm what I'd heard. But there was nothing, just pine needles and frost. No drag marks, no scuffs in the dirt. I even checked the trees near where the knocks had come from, running my fingers over the bark like I was reading Braille. Nothing. Still, I felt watched. Not constantly, just flashes, like something ducking behind my attention. I'd be heating water on the camp stove and suddenly feel that prickle on the back of my neck, that sense someone's behind you, too close. I'd whirl around and see only trees. But the feeling didn't leave. Around midday, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Sleep-deprived, jumpy, playing horror stories in my own head. I decided to pack up and drive a bit farther down the road. There was a second clearing marked on my map, about 5 miles in. It would still be isolated, but I figured the change of scenery might help. I didn't realize I was driving deeper into it. The road narrowed and the trees grew thicker. Shadows stretched across the dirt even in full daylight. I reached the second spot around 3 p.m. It was smaller, tighter, more enclosed by the forest. No wide view of the mountains like before, but flat enough to park and just open enough to get some sun. I set up camp again, tried to shake off the nerves, put on music, something soft, just loud enough to fill the silence. I made a fire early and sat close to it, listening to the wood pop. And then I found it. At the edge of the site, half buried under a drift of pine needles, was a scrap of cloth, a torn corner of what looked like flannel, red and black plaid. Weathered, faded, molded with damp. I wouldn't have thought much of it if not for the fact that it was tucked into the hollow of a log. Not just dropped, placed, hidden. I stood there staring at it for way too long, heart in my throat. My mind ran through every scenario. Maybe a hunter lost it, maybe another camper. But the fabric was stiff, like it had been there through more than one season. And there were no other signs of human activity. No bottles, no wrappers, no footprints. Just that one scrap of cloth, and a log that suddenly looked like a mouth. I didn't sleep in the van that night. I sat up in the driver's seat, keys in the ignition, one hand resting on the wheel. The fire had long gone out. I watched the woods through the windshield, breath fogging the glass, eyes darting to every movement between branches. Then, at exactly 2:43 a.m., I heard it again. Knock, 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 closer. It was maybe 10 feet from the van, and this time it wasn't wood on wood. It was knuckles, flesh, bone on metal. 3 slow taps, right against the back panel of the van near the rear driver's side. Not loud, not aggressive, deliberate. I didn't breathe. Didn't move. Every hair on my body stood on end, my ears strained for more. Footsteps, rustling, anything. But it was just those 3 knocks and then stillness. Then, from the opposite side, the passenger window, I heard breathing. Not gasping, not panting, just slow, steady breathing. Wet and too close. The kind of sound you only hear when someone's nose is inches from your ear. I turned my head so slowly I thought my neck would crack. I didn't lift my head, just shifted my eyes toward the glass. But there was nothing there, just the forest reflected in the window, and my own terrified face. I don't remember falling asleep. I must have drifted off from sheer exhaustion sometime near dawn. But when I woke up, the van smelled wrong. Not smoke, not mildew. Something sharp, metallic, blood. I scrambled out of the seat and threw open the door. I was standing in it before I really knew what I was doing. But the air was clear, cold. No trace of the smell anymore. I checked the van, top to bottom, my nose to every surface. Nothing, except for the rear panel where the knocks had come from. There, in the thin layer of morning frost, were 3 long finger streaks. Not handprints, just lines where frost had been wiped away, as if someone had dragged their fingertips across the metal in a perfect vertical motion. I lost it then. Packed everything in less than 5 minutes. Coffee maker still hot, solar panels half folded, shoes untied. I drove like hell down that dirt road, fishtailing through gravel, scraping the undercarriage on rocks I didn't even see. I didn't look back. Not once. I drove straight until I hit the nearest ranger station, some rundown outpost off a county road, half boarded and closed for the season. I parked anyway, sat in the lot, heart racing until the engine cooled and I could breathe again. And even then, even in daylight, with a road and power lines and signs of human life, I couldn't stop shaking. I stayed at a motel that night. I haven't slept in the van since. Not because I don't love it, not because it isn't my safe place, but because that silence, that terrible bottomless silence followed me back. And it waits. Not in the trees, but in the cracks of memory, in the moments when everything is too quiet. In the feeling I still get sometimes when I park in a new place and slide the door shut and realize I never heard it leave. I didn't talk about it for a long time. Not to friends, not even online where anonymity could have been my mask. It felt like a secret. Not just mine either, like something had been given to me, slipped into my life when I wasn't looking, a burden with a voice I hadn't yet learned to ignore. You'd think I'd stop camping after that. But I didn't. Not really. I tried. I stayed in cities, motels, parking lots with security lights, and gas stations that never turned off their music. I told myself it was temporary, just a few weeks until the nerves calmed down. But it never did. Not fully. And eventually I started craving the quiet again. That's the worst part of it, the most dangerous. When the fear becomes familiar, when your body adapts to it like it's the cost of freedom. Because after a few months, I found myself back in the mountains. This time it was New Mexico. A high desert ridge near the Carson National Forest. Open terrain, beautiful views, rocky, with plenty of sight lines, or so I told myself. It was the kind of spot that felt safe because you could see everything. I'd been on the road 3 weeks by then, trying to prove to myself that I hadn't been broken by that night in the woods. I was eating better, sleeping with earplugs. I even bought a small dog from a rescue in Albuquerque, a mutt named Trixie who never barked and barely even growled. We parked just off an old logging trail, high enough to catch the sunsets, far enough from the main road that no one would wander by. No trees, no shadows, just dry wind and red dust. I thought I was safe. Truly. I let my guard down, and that's when it found me again. It started small. Barely anything, really. One night, I took Trixie out to pee just after midnight. The stars were out, no moon, real dark. I stood by the van, flashlight pointed out toward the scrub. She wandered a little farther than usual, just out of reach of the beam. Then I heard her whimper, a sharp yelp. Not fear, not pain, confusion. I called her. She didn't come. I moved the beam of light and saw her standing completely still about 10 feet away, ears forward, tail rigid, just staring out into the desert. I called again. She turned her head slowly, looked at me, and then walked back like nothing had happened. But something had. That night, she curled into the footwell of the driver's seat instead of sleeping on the bed with me. Wouldn't move, even when I tried to lift her. She just kept watching the windshield. That was the first night I heard the scraping. It wasn't knocking this time. No, it was lighter than that, like fingernails on the fiberglass side panel. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It went on for about 30 seconds, then stopped. Then again from the opposite side, then the back, like something circling. I didn't move. I couldn't. The weirdest part? Trixie didn't make a sound. She didn't bark, didn't growl, just stayed frozen, eyes wide, ears pinned back. And when it stopped, she licked my wrist once and crawled under the bench seat to hide. I stayed up until the sun cracked the horizon. The next morning, I stepped outside with my phone in one hand and a knife in the other. I did a full perimeter sweep. No footprints, no drag marks. But on the driver's side mirror, just at the edge of the glass, was a greasy smear, like a handprint that had been licked and pressed there. I wiped it clean, told myself it was condensation or dust. Maybe the wind had carried something. But by then, I wasn't rationalizing anymore. I wasn't denying what I already knew. Whatever it was that I met that night in the pines, it wasn't stuck in those woods. It followed me. I moved again. I always do when something starts feeling off. This time I went south, deeper into the desert, onto BLM land near an old mine site. Miles from anything. I stayed one night at 3:14 a.m. My phone rang. That alone was enough to freeze my blood. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, no signal for hours in any direction. But it rang, just once. No caller ID, no number, just unknown. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The screen flashed, then went dark. When I checked the call log, nothing. No record had ever happened. I didn't sleep, just waited. Waited for the knock, the scrape, the breath, but nothing came. It was worse that way. The waiting. By sunrise, I packed up, didn't even make coffee. Drove half a tank before I realized I still hadn't blinked more than once or twice. But even after I got back to civilization, to pavement, to noise, to places with neon lights and people who never look up from their phones, it didn't feel over. Because here's the thing about what we call scary stories. They don't end. They don't have credits. They don't always come with a climax and a monster you can shoot or scream at or explain. Sometimes the story just stays with you. The real horror? It isn't in the moment you hear the knock. It's not the handprint or the phone call or the stare from the woods. It's what happens afterward. It's the way the silence gets inside you, the way every shadow starts to feel inhabited, the way you start to doubt whether you were ever alone, even before it started. I'm not telling you this to scare you away from the road or the woods or the life that calls so many of us out into the wild with our Volkswagens and our maps and our dreams of freedom. I'm telling you this so you respect it, because there are things out here that don't want your van or your gear or your money. They want attention. They want you to stay just long enough to notice them. They want you to open the door. And once you do, you can never fully close it again. I drove north, back into the mountains, thinking maybe elevation would give me clarity, or at least distance. The higher you climb, the thinner the air gets, and maybe I wanted to starve whatever was following me. Starve it of oxygen, of space. But I was wrong. You can't outdrive something that doesn't follow the rules of roads or maps or physics. You can't use logic on something that doesn't move when you look at it, but shifts when your eyes close. That's the kind of thing I didn't understand until I camped outside Flagstaff, Arizona. It was a free site, an old forest access clearing barely wide enough to turn the van around. Red earth, white pines, just a little slope for drainage. I'd stayed there once before, years earlier, and it felt safe then, familiar even. I thought, stupidly, that going back to a place I'd already survived might reset whatever had started unraveling inside me. But that's not what happened. The first night was quiet, so quiet it was almost peaceful. I cooked a simple meal, black beans, tortilla, eggs on the Coleman stove. Trixie sniffed around but stayed close. Her tail was low but not tucked. Her eyes followed the tree line more than usual. That was my first clue. It wasn't until the second night that I saw something again, and this time it was clear. It was just after 2 a.m. when I woke up. Not from a noise, not even from a dream, just woke up. My eyes opened like I'd been summoned, like someone had said my name without sound. I sat up slowly, trying not to disturb Trixie. She wasn't at the foot of the bed, not in the footwell either. I found her sitting in the front passenger seat, head pressed against the window. Not watching. Not barking. Listening. That's when I heard it too, the humming. Low. Almost mechanical, like a generator at the edge of hearing. But it pulsed, like it was alive, like it was breathing. I turned off the cabin fan, held my breath. The sound didn't change. It wasn't in the van. It was outside. I moved to the driver's seat and leaned toward the glass, but I didn't see anything at first. Just the empty dirt pullout, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. Then something moved behind the van. Slow. Steady. I didn't shine my flashlight. I didn't want to give myself away. Instead, I leaned toward the side mirror and froze. There was a figure standing in the reflection. Perfectly still. Maybe 15 feet behind the van. Too tall. Too thin. I couldn't make out a face, not in the dark, but the outline was wrong. Its shoulders didn't slope. They jutted forward like hooks. Its arms hung low, and the thing I'll never forget, its head tilted at a perfect angle like a question mark. It was watching me through the mirror. And then it moved, not toward the van, but down. It dropped soundlessly to the ground like it had no bones. I gasped. A full-body shock reaction. And just like that, the humming stopped. The silence that followed was louder than the noise. I grabbed my keys and turned the engine over. My first instinct was to gun it, tear out of there, whatever the cost. But something deep inside me, something ancient, something that didn't come from survival guides or common sense, stopped me. It said, "Don't move. Not yet. If you drive, it'll chase you." So I sat, idling, headlights off, waiting. Trixie crawled back onto the bench beside me. I could feel her whole body trembling, her breathing short and shallow. Minutes passed. Then something knocked on the back door. Once, twice, 3 times. Not loud, not frantic. Calm, measured, like it was being polite, like it knew it had time. I didn't move. I couldn't. My limbs were cement. My blood had slowed to a crawl. I whispered, "Not tonight." Then the 4th knock came, but not on the van. It came from the roof. Trixie whimpered, crawled underneath the sink. I kept staring straight ahead, and finally, it stopped. The feeling didn't leave, but the presence did. You can feel the difference when it's gone, like a vacuum being unplugged, like the pressure lifts off your chest. I drove at sunrise, no looking back, didn't even eat, just followed the winding road down the mountain until the trees turned sparse and the air warmed and it felt like maybe the grip around my throat had finally loosened. That's when I started to realize this thing, whatever it wasn't attached to a place. It was attached to me. Or maybe not even me, but the idea of me. A person alone in a van. A silhouette against a windshield. A heartbeat with wheels. That's what it followed. Not my name, not my scent, but the shape of my isolation. There's a reason some people swear off solo camping forever. A reason others dive headfirst into it, like they're chasing something when really they're being chased. I started thinking about all the people who go missing in the wild. Not hikers, not search and rescue cases. I mean the ones no one talks about, the long-term travelers. The van lifers who stop posting, the retirees who don't check back in, the solo adventurers who disappear from the map. We always assume they made a mistake. What if they didn't? What if they opened something? What if one night they answered a knock? It sounds paranoid, I know, but after what I saw, after what kept happening, it's not paranoia. It's protocol. I started doing things differently after that. Never stayed more than 2 nights in the same place. Slept with road flares under my pillow. Stopped using my name on camping apps. Stopped leaving geotags. Kept my curtains closed even when I was alone for days. You'd be surprised how fast you can adapt to fear. How quickly you normalize sleeping with a knife on your chest. But no matter how much you change, if it wants to find you again, it will. Because it's not after your van. It's not after your stuff. It's after your attention. And the moment you feel alone enough to give it, that's when it taps. That's when it hums. I made it all the way to New Mexico before I let my guard down again. Something about the high desert calms you, even when it shouldn't. The open sky, the scrub brush, the heat that lingers long after sunset, it all feels honest. Like if something was coming for you out there, it wouldn't bother hiding. I camped outside of Taos along a dusty forest road just wide enough for the van. No signs, no cell service, a little pullout between the pine-on-pines. I parked with a view of the open valley, golden hills rolling into a horizon that never ended. The solitude didn't bother me like it used to. I told myself I'd earned a break. I was careful now. I paid attention to signs. I listened to my instincts. I didn't linger where I shouldn't. But sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes the wrong place finds you. I remember that afternoon so vividly because for once I wasn't afraid. I made camp slow and intentional. I laid out the rug, cooked lentils and rice, let Trixie roam on her line. We sat in the open door of the van, watching the suns slip lower, the shadows stretch longer. The breeze was soft, the silence deep but not heavy. I almost believed I'd outrun it, that I'd moved far enough, thought smart enough, protected myself well enough to break whatever had tried to cling to me. It was just after 11:30 p.m. when that belief shattered. I was reading in bed, lantern on low, Trixie curled at my feet. And then, like someone flipping a switch in my gut, I felt it. The change, the stillness turned too still. The silence stopped being silence and became something else, something alert. You know that sensation when a room changes, even though nothing visibly has? Like the presence of someone else behind you, even if you haven't heard a step? That. I turned off the lantern, sat in the dark, waited. A minute passed. 2. Then came the sound, not loud but impossible to misinterpret. Footsteps, just outside the van, not animal movement, not the shuffle of a raccoon or the crack of brush under deer hooves. These were slow, heavy, human. They circled the van once, deliberate and steady, gravel crunching under boot soles, a pause every few steps, like they were studying me, testing the walls. I didn't breathe. Trixie stayed completely still, not even a growl, just this low, almost inaudible whimper, as if even she knew, don't draw attention. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside the driver's door, and I heard it, the sound of something brushing against the side mirror. Not knocking, not shaking, just touching. I reached for the key in the ignition, moved slow. My fingers barely made a sound. But then came the voice, right outside the glass. Don't. Soft. Almost kind. A woman's voice. My blood froze. I didn't move. Don't turn it on, she said again, a little closer this time. He's right behind you. I couldn't help it. I looked. No one was in the van. The space behind me was empty. I was alone. But the voice had sounded so real. I turned the key anyway. The engine didn't start. I tried again. Click. Nothing. My chest tightened. My mind spiraled. Battery? Sabotage? Did someone mess with the fuel line? Then the mirror twisted. Right in front of me, the side mirror bent upward like something was gripping it, like someone's hand was trying to fold it into the window. And I saw it, in the faint moonlight, reflected in the curve of the glass, not a face, not even a person, a shape, long, bent, skin like damp bark, eyes too wide, reflecting light that wasn't there. And behind it, deeper in the woods, another figure. Then another. All the same shape, all watching, none moving. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't even blink. I just whispered, "Please, no." Then the passenger door clicked. Unlocked. Not from the outside, from inside. I lost time after that. I don't remember unlocking the back. I don't remember grabbing Trixie. But the next clear memory I have is running barefoot down the dirt road, flashlight bouncing wildly, holding her under one arm and not looking back. I ran until my lungs felt like they were tearing, until my legs buckled and I hit the ground. Then I crawled behind a fallen tree and covered us both in my sleeping bag, and I stayed there until the sun came up. Not once did I hear them follow. They didn't have to. They'd already been inside. When I returned, the van was untouched. Locked, no signs of forced entry, no tracks, no handprints, no proof. Except this, my camera, which I'd left on the dash, had a new photo on it. Just one. A picture of me. Sleeping, taken from the foot of the bed. I left New Mexico that day and haven't gone back. I've changed vans, I've changed plates, I've sold or burned most of what I carried back then. But that camera, I keep it in a box under lock and key. Just so I never forget. Some things don't want to hurt you outright. They want to unmake you. They want to unravel your sense of reality, one whisper, one reflection, one night at a time. And if you let your guard down even once, they slip in. And once they're in, they stay. I kept driving after New Mexico. Didn't stop to think, didn't process, just pointed the van north and moved. Through Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. Every night I slept less. Every day I spoke fewer words. There's a point where fear becomes routine, where the sharp edges smooth out and you stop reacting to danger the way a person should. It's not bravery, it's damage. I started parking in lit areas, Walmart lots, casino overflow. I told myself I'd earned rest, but the truth was I didn't trust the dark anymore. Not the real dark, the kind you find between tree trunks, out where maps go vague and GPS cuts out and the sky feels too close to breathe under. But the road keeps calling. And something in me, something stubborn, maybe stupid, needed to face it one more time. Not to win, to understand. It was late fall when I rolled into Idaho. A ranger station near the Clearwater River had mentioned a dispersed camping area just off a forgotten logging road. The woman behind the desk had hesitated before telling me about it. Most folks pass it by, she said. Kind of an odd place. Quiet, but odd. I thanked her, said that sounded perfect. She didn't smile. The drive up was long and winding, switchbacks overgrown with golden grass and pine needles. Trixie whimpered the whole way, not loud, not scared, just unsettled. Like her instincts were catching something mine had long ago learned to ignore. The clearing appeared around a bend, framed by leaning pines and a fire ring full of ash. A single wooden picnic table rotted at the edge, half sunken into moss. Nobody had camped here in months, maybe longer. I killed the engine, got out, and for the first time since New Mexico, I let myself feel the silence. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't safe either. It was watching. That night, I built a fire and sat beside it, journal open, just staring into the pages. I hadn't written anything real in weeks, not since the picture, but the words came, slow and halting, not stories, not events. Questions. Why me? Was it ever really about me? Is something following or is something waiting? I didn't hear them approach. No footsteps, no voices. Just the sudden, absolute knowing that someone was behind me. When I turned, nothing was there. But the fire crackled louder. The trees leaned closer. My skin prickled like the air had dropped 10 degrees in a breath. Trixie stood now, tail stiff, growling low. I looked down at the journal, and there was a sentence on the page I hadn't written. You left the door open. I slammed the book shut and backed toward the van. But the sliding door was already open. I hadn't touched it. Inside, nothing moved. Nothing waited. But the smell, that rich, rotting earth smell, like wet wood and something older, it was inside the van. Faint, lingering, as if whatever had been outside all these months had come in with me. I drove. I didn't think. Just twisted the key and floored it down the logging road, tires skidding, gravel spitting. I drove past the ranger station, past the last town with a name I could pronounce, until I reached a highway with semis and headlights and civilization. And even then, I couldn't stop looking in the mirror. Not at the road behind me, at the inside of the van, checking for something that wasn't supposed to exist. That was 2 years ago. I still live in a van. A different one now. Different make, different color, different state plates every few months. But I never camp in the dark. I never park where no one can hear me scream. And I never, ever leave the door open, not even for a second. I've learned to accept something I never wanted to know. Fear doesn't always wear a face. Sometimes it's a place, a sound, a sensation that never leaves your bones. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what happens to you out there, it's what follows you back. Because the truth is, I don't think those things, those figures, were after me. Not really. They were showing me something, teaching me the kind of lesson you can't unlearn. Out there in the stillness, in the dark places off the maps, something old is watching. Not evil, not good, just ancient. It waits for people like me, people who break routine, who wander into its blind spots and forget, for one foolish second, that the world doesn't owe us safety. It waits for people who think the scariest thing is being alone. But real horror? It's not being alone. It's realizing you never were. People ask me now why I still camp, why I still sleep in a Volkswagen van, still wander the back roads of this country, still park in places with no cell signal, no neighbors, no guarantee I'll wake up untouched. They don't understand the pull. They only see the danger. And yeah, danger's real. I've felt it in the dirt under my nails, in the snap of a twig behind my tent at midnight, in the breath that wasn't mine fogging up the window from the inside. But there's something else I've found out here too. Something stronger than fear. It's not safety. It's meaning. Out here, you're not distracted by the noise, not buried in deadlines, not hiding behind routines. When the silence stretches long enough, you start hearing your own thoughts again. The real ones. Not the polished versions you tell friends, but the raw ones, the scared ones, the honest ones. Camping alone strips you bare. It forces you to face what you'd rather leave behind. The trauma, the regret, the memory that wakes you up at 3:12 a.m. and leaves you gasping. Out here, there's no door between you and the world. No barrier between what you think you are and what you truly become when things go wrong. And yeah, it can go wrong. Sometimes it really, really does. Sometimes there's something in the woods that isn't a deer. Sometimes the knocking at your door isn't the wind. Sometimes you learn the hard way that you should have trusted your gut the first time. But you learn. You learn how to trust, how to listen, how to stay still, how to move when it's time. You learn that surviving something doesn't mean it didn't change you. It means it did. And you came out the other side anyway. I don't tell these stories to scare people off. I tell them because they're real. And because if you're going to venture into the dark, into the forests and deserts and ghost-traced highways of this country, you deserve to know what's waiting out there. Not monsters, not ghosts. Truth. The truth that sometimes we don't go camping to escape life. We go to meet the parts of ourselves that only show up when no one else is watching. So yeah, I still camp, because fear didn't break me. It introduced me to who I really am, and I'll take that over safety any day.